questions, comments, or changes? Hearing none, can we get a motion, please?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to accept the minutes of the April 20th, 2023 meeting.
Second. Motion and a second. Any more discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Nay? Any opposed? Abstain. Thank you, Joe. Old business, Stillwater Distribution, ID number 22-01, public hearing. Major land development, preliminary plan review, AP 45, lot 18, and AP 46, lot 71, 72, 73, 74, and 76. 295 George Washington Highway, 92 acres approximately, HC and PC zone, applicant Wharton Smithfield LLC, owners Jake Development Co. LLC and Rollingwood Acres Inc., engineer DePreet Engineering. First, we'll address the applicant's request for a waiver for submission items required pursuant to the subdivision regulations and associated checklist requirements, including a waiver of the physical alteration permit and freshwater wetland alteration permit.
With your permission, Mr. Chairman, just to set the table for the board, the agenda is set out so that the board is required to address these waiver requests before we proceed with the hearing this evening, and that's on purpose. If you grant the waivers, then we can proceed with the hearing. If not, it will go back to the planner for a certificate of incompleteness. And since I mentioned the planner's name, let me just add to the mix that the planner is recommending that you grant the waivers that are being requested here this evening. There are three. A waiver of the requirement of having the DOT permits in hand prior to proceeding with preliminary plan. The second is having DEM permits in hand prior to proceeding with the preliminary plan. And the third is sediment control and erosion. For guidance, Article C indicates that the planning board shall have the authority to waive or modify one or more of the requirements for subdivision or land development approval contained in these regulations if the planning board finds that the waiver or modification is reasonable and within the general purposes and intents of these regulations. Little enforcement of the regulation is impracticable and will exact undue hardship because of the particular conditions pertaining to the land in question, or waiver or modification of the regulation is in the best interest of good planning practice or design as evidenced by consistency with the comprehensive community plan and the zoning ordinance. And then third, waiver does not reduce the standard below the requirement of the Smithfield zoning ordinance. And I want to be clear, the waivers are only so that we can proceed this evening, not waiving the requirement completely. They will have to be in hand either before approval of preliminary or a condition of preliminary plan approval. So if there aren't any questions, I'll yield the floor to the applicant so he can make his proof to you.
Just to clarify, even if we do waive these tonight, they are still required to obtain these permits
Yes, absolutely.
as part of the final.
Yes, it's just a waiver of having these checklist items in hand before proceeding with a hearing. That's it.
Okay, just to clarify for everybody. So does everybody on the board understand what we're looking for here? Do we have any comments or questions on that?
The board has always put conditional approval on these permits being for approval of preliminary plans.
And we can do that with a motion. Mhm. And again, no matter what passes, if it passes, they're required to obtain these permits as part of the.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. Can we get an understanding of why this information isn't available?
I think Mr. Kelly is ready to answer that question.
Members of the board, Mr. Chairman, Michael Kelly for the applicant and the owner. In terms of the DEM permit, keeping in mind it's a 91-acre site, there were some wetlands on the site that had to be dealt with, and the drainage from this facility, obviously the designing that drainage and then obtaining the approval from DEM is quite a chore. The building is 1 million square feet. All the drainage from the stormwater from the roof, et cetera, and the parking lots have to be dealt with. We submitted the application to DEM back in September of 2022. And we have answered several letters of comment. Recently, about a week ago, we received what we're being told is the final comment letter, which had some minor items that had to be addressed in regard to the biological aspect of it and the stormwater aspect of it. And so we have diligently pursued it. We have been having meetings with DEM on a regular basis, initially 2 weeks, every 2 weeks, and now it's monthly. And we have done everything possible. As I'm sure you probably know, or I hope you know, DEM is extremely backlogged and does not have sufficient manpower to review these applications in a timely manner. But we're pretty close to the end of the road. It's supposed to go out to notice, I believe, in 3 weeks. It's public notice, comments are received, and then they will issue a decision. So we have certainly pursued that very, very diligently. In regard to the DOT permit, we filed our initial preliminary back in June of 2022. And my understanding is that the preliminary was held up as a result of the issue concerning a connection to the Conti property. As we submitted our application recently, about a month and a half ago, after that issue got straightened out, and the DOT indicated they were going to review our application based upon our project and not the development of adjacent properties, as suggested by the abutter. And as recently as the other day, Mr. Rocchio indicated that they are reviewing the permit, and they had a couple of comments which are being addressed by Mr. Bannon, who unfortunately can't be here tonight, and that they will proceed to review it and go forward with the comments and approval. Not my experience over decades is that this is certainly not an uncommon occurrence, particularly in a project this large. This is not something that DEM sees every day. And obviously the engineering just to get the plans together is a major task. So as I said, we've done everything we can to push that application towards an approval, which we believe will issue. As the chairman said, this is not a waiver of the permit. It's just allows us to go forward tonight. Obviously, we have a lot of other information to present you in terms of the site plan, et cetera. And we would like to proceed tonight, give you that information, receive your comments and input, and then come back at a time in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly.
Thank you.
Rick, does that answer your question?
I guess my comment would be if there's things that we're going to be voting on in this proposal that would be affected by the design, by the information that we don't have yet, then I'm a little concerned.
Would the engineer be able to come up and speak on that behalf, or Mr. Kelly, if you can answer that question? Is there anything that we would be looking at tonight that would be changed based on any of that information?
No, not to my knowledge. The comments on the drainage issue had to do with a basin, some basins and underground versus above ground basins for penetration of stormwater. And the other, the issue with DOT will not affect this design that we currently have. Oh, I thought that was clear. I apologize. We certainly are not asking you to vote on this proposal tonight. We'd like you to, but I don't think it would be appropriate.
Thank you.
Do you-
Go ahead.
do you think you'll have the information available before we vote on it?
I think that we will if we don't have it, what do you mean by information?
The approvals?
The approvals?
Because in the process of getting an approval,
Yeah.
there is, like you mentioned, there's
Yeah.
there's back and forth. There are design changes or things that DOT may want. And that's probably not represented right now on these set of drawings.
My understanding from DOT is that if there are any comments or proposed modifications, they would have to do with off-site issues and not the site itself. So same thing with DEM. There wouldn't be any change to what you see here. There may be some slight changes in size of detention ponds, or detention ponds may turn into underground structures for penetration.
Rick, I think part of that too would be, I know every project they ask for final approval to possibly be held administratively. But if we do it here rather than administratively, then we would see that they're in at that point in time.
Yeah, not something of this magnitude.
No, of course, but I'm saying, so
No,
being
I understand what you're
that,
saying, yeah.
bringing it here for final would definitely have to show that they have all their approvals out, you know. Do we have any more discussion, questions? If not, I'm okay with the waivers.
Can we hear from the engineer?
Sure.
Do I have to be sworn in or anything?
Just your name, please, for the record.
Eric Privy, Prive. I'm a registered professional engineer with DePreet Engineering. Office is at 2 Stafford Court in Cranston, Rhode Island.
So what are the outstanding issues? What's the conversations? What's both DEM and DOT?
So with DEM, the questions were, there's actually an existing basin that's located in the northeast corner. Actually, I'm going to go over and highlight it real quick here. Let me see, make sure it shows up okay for you guys. It's not really showing up at all. So, got to turn it on. That's a good help. There we go. So there's an existing basin here because of the operations that are going on site. So one of the questions was whether or not getting access to that in the future. We decided to just redesign a little bit and have the front basin a little bit larger and let that basin be as is. So that's the discussion of what we're having. We have gone with a couple rounds of comments. Again, there's an engineer and a biologist. We've satisfied all the engineering concerns. There was just a couple outstanding biological concerns, and that's what it was stemmed around that. Again, access to that back pond, which we've now since just removed, even needing to go to that pond. So on the DOT end, we wouldn't envision that it would be anything substantial in that area. Again, the location we had submitted a pre-PAPA to get that feedback early to figure out where that would be located, and got a general acceptance of that location. It would be, as Attorney Kelly had mentioned, it might be some minor tweaks to where a sidewalk would go a little bit, or just ensuring the signal timing between the different signals and such, but we wouldn't envision geometrically where it's located and the amenities of it would be changing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions? I don't think that's going to be an issue.
No.
No, I don't think that's
No,
a factor.
it's come this far.
If nothing else, at this point, I think we'd be looking for a motion to approve the waiver of physical alteration permit and a waiver of freshwater wetland alteration permit at this time.
So moved.
And what, I'm sorry? Sediment control.
So moved.
Motion and a second. Do we have any more discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Ayes have it. Please proceed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
First, just a little background. We have at least one new member. And we appeared before you on January 20th, 2022 for a pre-application conference, and then came back in February 17th, 2022, and March 17th, 2022, St. Patrick's Day. Unanimous approval of the master plan was given on March 17th. The decision was posted on April 13th, 2022, and we appeared back in February 16th, presented the preliminary plans to show the board the revisions that had been made from the master plan, primarily the location of the driveway out to Route 7, which was moved south, as I'm sure you know. And along the way, we have submitted quite a few documents, reports, et cetera, to the board. And we have supplied that list to Mr. Phillips. And we would ask that the board accept those submissions as part of the record this evening. There's a extensive list of almost a little over 2 pages of documents, plus a second item, which you'll see tonight, which is a revised landscape plan for 116, which you'll see proposes, subject to DOT approval, that the right-of-way in front of what's the existing office of Smithfield Pete would be landscaped. One side of it is a detention basin, but the other side it could be subject to landscaping, which we've proposed. But asked if the board would please accept these exhibits as part of the record here. As I said, Mr. Phillips has the list. He's received the documents. Oops.
I just received the list, and we'll have to go through it, and anything that is not in your packet already, we will get to you for certainly by the next meeting, so.
Thank you.
Scott, is this board exhibit 1? Plan?
Yeah, we'll mark it. Within the site plan.
Landscaping on 116.
Thank you.
If I may, as you know, that this property is located along 116, Route 7 and 295, approximately 91 acres, zoned PC and the EGOD. Been used since the 60s, if not longer, for initially the excavation of peat, and then it's been used as materials processing, as I'm sure you know. As I indicated, Mr. Bannon, the traffic engineer, is unavailable this evening, and we will be presenting to you Mr. Eric Preve, who will go through extensively the site plan, drainage, wetlands issues, and also will, we've already submitted a response to you for Mr. Casale's comments, which have written response has been submitted to the planning board, to Mr. Phillips, and Mr. Preve will address that. And we'll also be presenting Mr. Carter, John Carter, a registered architect who had done the plan so far, and as I indicated, added submitted one additional form of the landscape plan It's the one that's up on the board there. And take a look up at 116 towards the left top of the screen. You'll see the note in that area supposed to be landscaped. The property, the piece of, that's a part of the state right of way, so it's subject to their approval. Can't imagine that they wouldn't approve that. On the, just to the left of that landscaped area, you'll see what's, it's colored brown, and that's a detention area, and it's in the state DOT right away, so that virtually nothing that we can do to that. And unless you have questions of me, Mr. Preve will go through these plan, et cetera, and answer any questions you might have. Do you have any questions of me before Mr. Preve gets up? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening again. For the record, Eric Prevey, a registered P-R-I-V-E, registered professional engineer with Deprete Engineering. I'd like to go through with you real briefly, kind of coming from outside and kind of making sure everybody understands where we are, where this parcel is, what's around it, to be able to understand the context. It is a 92-acre parcel. It is located generally at the corner of George Washington Highway, or Route 116, and Douglas Pike, Route 7. It is zoned planned corporate and highway commercial. So there's a kind of a split zone. You can see it in the corner there. It's also within the economic growth overlay, or the EGO district as well. There's approximately 500, let me get my pointer here. It's approximately 574 feet of frontage along Douglas Pike over here. There's approximately 800 feet of frontage along George Washington Highway to the north here. And then there's approximately 241 feet of frontage on Lydia Ann. So kind of Lydia Ann comes in this diagonal right here as well. Surrounding zoning of the area, I'm sorry, let me give you more context. This is Interstate 295 located right here as well. It's going in a north-south fashion. So you can see this parcel actually butts right up against, on the eastern side of this parcel actually comes right up to Interstate 295. You can see it when you're driving by some of the operations and such that are happening with Smithfield Peak. As mentioned, it is operating as Smithfield Peak today. It is primarily cleared. You can see from the aerial. I'm actually going to zoom in a little bit real quickly here. So this is a recent aerial, and you can see the gravel operations that are going on from Smithfield Peak. You can see how a majority of the site today is disturbed and being used for operations and such. There's some areas of trees and forested area in the northeast portion here, and there's a small portion along the southern portion here. The majority of the site, you can see, is part of the operations today. So we're not going from a fully wooded forested site that you see sometimes. This is a current operation that's going on today. And there are also all the processing equipment that goes with that. There are settling basins, as I mentioned. There's existing sediment controls that go on for the daily operations that go on with this as well. Those are all happening on site today. As far as wetlands, I'm going to actually flip back over to the other page real quick. So as far as wetlands on the site, there are three wetland complexes on the site. There's an A-series wetland that's located kind of in the south central portion here. That A-series wetland is a wooded swamp marsh complex right here. There is a 50-foot perimeter wetland that's associated with that as well. So that's 50 feet off the edge of the biological wetland in this area over here. The B-series wetland is located in the northeast portion over here, and that is a wooded swamp as well. So that's located up here in this northeastern portion. We're back. In the northeast portion over here, there is the B series wetland that's located over here. And that is also, that's a wooded swamp, and that also has a 50-foot perimeter wetland associated with it as well. And then there's a third wetland complex over here. It's majority it's offsite over here. So as Attorney Kelly had mentioned, there's a kind of a basin that goes adjacent to George Washington Highway. It wraps around the commercial parcel here and comes around the back side over here. That's all part of a C, and that's an emergent plant community, and that does not have any jurisdictional buffer associated with it as well. So we go right to the edge of that one. That wetland, the wetlands have been submitted to the Department of Environmental Management. A wetland edge verification was submitted, and that was reviewed and approved and verified by DEM under application number 22-0020 that was dated February 25th of 2022. So that is saying that DEM has reviewed all of the wetlands, agrees with their location. They're not shifting. They won't be moving in the future. So that was locked in as well. Soil testing. Soil testing was performed on the site by a DEM Class 4 licensed soil evaluator throughout the site. You can see it on the site plans throughout. I'll go through it generally. As you can imagine, on a parcel 92 acres, there is a good variability. There are some 2 foot groundwater tables, and there's some areas that are greater than 12 feet. I mean, as deep as we can dig the excavator, it's deeper than that. So all the soils on the site are good sandy soils. They're well receiving for and suitable for development as well. Topography, just to kind of get you familiar with the topography of the site. So in the south central portion over here, that's the highest portion of the site over here. So it's right here, and it kind of, from a watershed perspective, there's a small, I wouldn't say ridge, but it's just kind of the general watershed goes over towards this B series over here. So there's a break that goes to the B series here, and then there's another break that goes to the west over here towards the A series wetland over here as well. So this is the high point over here, the topography rolling kind of with a ridge in this direction, almost in line with what this building is today. So everything to the east of this building goes towards the B, everything to the west goes towards the A series and towards the front of the site as well. The lowest portion of the site is down around elevation 340, and that's located down towards Douglas Pike over in this portion over here of the site. In the areas, you probably saw it from the aerial as well, the operation area is relatively flat with some differences in pitch of where they are. So there's kind of like plateaus throughout the site. So there's areas of flatness and then a kind of a step down and another area of a platform of, so relatively flat from with the changes of going around 400 down to 340 at the front, pitching over that whole site there though. So I know 60 feet doesn't sound like it's flat. I'm saying plateaus, so small areas. Each area has its own, and then kind of steps down as it goes down around the corner over here as well. As far as utilities, existing utilities on the site, there is municipal sewer located both in George Washington Highway and in Douglas Pike. Those are both gravity sewer mains, non-pressurized in the area. Municipal water as well. There is water located both in George Washington Highway and in Douglas Pike as well. Moving to the proposed design, we're proposing there's 2 buildings on here. So there's a 1 million square foot building that's located right here in the central portion of the site. That's kind of that tan color that's located right here. That is approximately 1,770 feet long by 575 feet wide. So obviously there's a piece of the corner that's chunked out there, but that's the overall dimensions, 1770 by, and that's the 1 million square foot building here. And there's a secondary building that's located in the front here. So that is a 120,000 square foot building in the front. So that's a 300 by 400 rectangle building located here at the front. The building in the front, as far as parking, I'm going to kind of talk about parking a little bit as well, give you some background on that. For the building one in the front, vehicular parking that's located for employees and such, there's 134 spaces proposed right here in front of building number 1. By zoning, the minimum would be 120. So we're providing above what's required and not asking for any relief or variances for that. That also includes the landscape islands as required by the ordinance as well. Loading, there are 34 loading spaces along the rear of the building. So when I say rear, I'm talking about if I was driving along Douglas Pike here, the rear behind the building. There's 34 loading, 33 loading spaces along the back there. By code, the calculation would only be 3 would be minimum needed for, but obviously for the use that we're providing, there's loading docks that are required for this specific use. That's why we're providing as many as we are. And then truck parking, there's some additional truck parking spaces. So that's for extra bodies that would be back over in this area that aren't at the loading bays. So there would be some extra parking spaces. They'll leave some of those back there for truck parking spaces. We have 42 truck parking spaces for that front building. As far as the rear building, that's the 1 million square foot building in the back there. There are 1,070 parking spaces, and that's to meet the code. So there are located in here, you can see right here. And then there's also a secondary area. Make sure I don't mix it in right here. There's a secondary for employee in case and I'll get to it in a little bit, but there's possibility of phasing to be able to break it up. We wanted to make sure there was employee parking adjacent to that piece of the building as well. So there's 1,070 spaces that would be, by code, zoning ordinance requires a minimum of 1,000 spaces, so we're not asking for any relief of that. Again, landscape islands and such in there. Loading, we have 271 loading spaces here, again, by calculate, and so that's along both sides of the building here. You can see that along the northeast portion and the southwest portion, so those are all the loading spaces in here. That would be minimum 25 by code for this size building, but again, given the use that we have here, we see a need for that many spaces to be adjacent to the building. And then truck parking spaces, there's some additional truck parking spaces both here, and there's some that's located here. And again, that's 259 truck parking spaces. Again, there's no minimum by calculation, but that's what we feel the market would need for this distribution facility. Moving to the driveways themselves, there's 2 types of driveways in here. There's the truck access driveways, and those are 30-foot wide with a concrete curb. So curbing and 30-foot wide, so that's 2 15-foot travel lanes on site for the truck access areas. And then the employee areas that we would be for more for employees and pedestrian vehicular part would be 24 feet wide. So those are a little bit narrower, what you would typically see like in a regular subdivision road for standard vehicles for like employees and such. So that's 24 feet wide, and then that would also have curbing as well. Water, we've got the water proposed is coming from Douglas Pike, the water main that's off of Douglas Pike. There are 2, we're working with the water department directly on that. There are 2 services that come from that. We would end up having the domestic water line. So we got a 3-inch tap for a domestic water line. And then there would be a fire protection line as well. So that's a 12-inch line that would be coming strictly for fire protection. Again, we would be looping around the building with the fire protection mains and servicing the building for future sprinklers and such. As far as other fire protection, we've been working with the fire marshal, and we'll make sure that he is happy as well for hydrant spacing. We have hydrants spaced all throughout the site, and we're continuing to work with the fire marshal to make sure that we have adequate spacing and that there's more than enough hydrants in the site to be able to take care of the facility. And there's also a fire department connection to be able to override and assist on sprinkler operations and such. We do have a location for a tower, a water tower if needed. Again, depends on what that use would need, what a future user would end up needing, but there's a possibility to supplement with additional flows out of a water tower if needed. We don't feel that it will be needed this time, but we wanted to site it, put it on there to be able to show where that could be located rather than try to find a place for it after the fact. As far as sewer, we're proposing gravity sewer out to Douglas Pike here as well. So we've got a 6-inch main that will come directly from the primary building here, 6-inch main that would go gravity all the way to the gravity system in Douglas Pike as well. As far as stormwater, we've worked with Department of DEM's best management practices, and we've been working to It's a combination of both underground, so there's some underground portions of the system in here, and then there's some above ground too. So you end up having water quality treatment and treatment directly on the site, making sure to treat for all the impervious area that's on site. So we have water quality with underground that's underneath here. You can see them underneath in the site plans. And then there's also some underneath this parking here. And then there's also some above ground as well. We have some more traditional basins that you see sometimes with just above ground. We have one here, and then we have a couple located at the front over here. All the mitigation measures have been designed to meet to pre-development levels. So for the 2 through 100-year frequency storms. So that's saying whatever is coming off of the site today, existing conditions, we have to be equal to or less than for every single storm, and we are for every single storm. We had also provided comprehensive stormwater management calculations. We provided those both to the town. We provided those to DEM, their engineer, to review as well. We provided that to Department of Transportation, to their engineer as well. We've also provided the soil erosion and sediment control plan that comes with that. We've provided the operations and maintenance plan. So the operations and maintenance plan is the long-term, making sure who's taking care of these stormwater measures and making sure that they're operating properly. We've provided all of those documents as well. They're all very comprehensive documents. I think the stormwater report's actually a 2-volume set, given the size of it as well. As far as freshwater wetlands, as Attorney Kelly had mentioned, we have been working with the Department of Environmental Management. We've actually been able to have Teams teleconference meetings with them. They've been very nice to meet with us, and every 2 to 3 weeks. It's usually around 2 weeks, but sometimes it's 3 weeks depending on schedules and such. But we've been meeting with them recurringly to go through and make sure that we're addressing all the engineer and biological comments as well. As far as wetland impacts and mitigation, one portion of the A-series wetland, actually right here in this portion of the A-series wetland is in order to have this configuration to work for the 1 million square foot building by the time we sited it and location and orienting it. The associated parking and loading that goes with that goes a little bit into this A-series wetland here. So we are filling a piece of this A-series wetland here, and we've been working with Department of Environmental Management again to ensure that we're providing all the proper mitigation measures that go with that as well. We're providing some additional screening. We're providing additional buffer planting along here. And we've been working with them to work on that portion of the wetland as well. As far as landscaping and buffering, I'm not going to touch on it too much, but we have provided landscaping all throughout. John Carter's here tonight and he'll testify, so I'll yield on that one. But we have provided the comprehensive landscaping and buffering as well throughout the whole property. One of the items that I did want to talk about was at the master plan, there was some concerns about, going back to stormwater for a minute, we did have some discussions about potential flooding or stormwater that was coming across one of these culvert pipes to one of our abutters. And they mentioned that at the master plan meeting, and we were asked to take some. We were asked to take an additional look and make sure coming into preliminary plan how we've handled that. So I want to address that a little bit here as well. I believe he's here tonight in the audience as well, and I just want to be able to address that in advance as well. We did take a look at that, and the pipe there's a cross culvert pipe that comes across Douglas Pike in this area. It was originally a 15-inch cross culvert pipe several years ago. During some of the improvements that DOT had done along the way, they had upsized that pipe to an 18-inch pipe. It provided some additional stormwater that came across to that property as well. We don't have control of what the state does within that 15-inch, but I believe they've since changed that back to the 15 with just the 18. So the outside of, there's an 18-inch pipe that comes out of there, but across the street it's back down to a 15. I can tell you on our end for the stormwater design, what we did, we took a look at it and we provided the detailed calculations of what reductions we've had. We've took an even stronger look at the reductions in that area, what that equals. And I actually want to just put up, we put a that's difficult to see. Hold on. sorry, hopefully everybody can see that a little bit better. So the one that we're talking about is design point 2, that was where that pipe was leaving. And we have substantial reductions for majority of the storms. So for the 10-year storm, again, that's to give everybody a quick background, 10-year storm is the frequency of when it'll happen. It's a larger storm. It'd be the probability of once every 10 years. 25-year storm is probability it would happen once every 25 years, a more rare storm, and a 100-year storm. So we're showing the decreases to that. Again, we've got substantial decreases to this area as well. And we've really looked at that both from a rate, so that how quickly it's coming out of the pipe, and also from a volume. So that's the long-term, how much pure quantity is coming out of that pipe. So we've looked at that and provided additional mitigation for those as well. I did want to note that also a memo was put together that kind of went with all that information. I put the information on there so it was quicker, easier to see for this, but this information was with a letter, and it was sent to the abutter in particular to demonstrate and show what we've done and how we've looked at this to improve that area as well. As far as traffic intersection improvements, again, I'm not going to go too deep on it because we do have a traffic engineer that's going to go through it comprehensively, but I can give you some general, because I think it's important to the overview of laying out this project as well. As far as, I'll start at Douglas Pike. Let me go back. On Douglas Pike, we are providing a new signalized traffic intersection over here as well. As part of that as well, coming from if we were entering the site, so I'll talk specifically about if I was entering the site, there's a dedicated, if I was going northbound, coming from I-295, I've got a dedicated right turn lane that's now coming here now. So if I was coming to here, I'd have a dedicated right turn lane to come off and come into the property. If I was coming from the northbound, coming in, I wanted to take a left into the site, I now have a queued up left lane here, a left only lane that will be at that traffic signal and be provided that left turn lane, that left light to come into the site as well. As far as exiting, I've got a dedicated right out. So if I wanted to go northbound to leave here, there's a dedicated right out with a yield to be able to come through and go directly to the north here. And then to the south, if I wanted to go to 295, I would have 2 dedicated left lanes here. You can see there's 2 lanes here. Again, it would have the traffic signal to protect it, to turn and have the vehicles come into the flow of traffic in this area as well. Also, there's some improvements along Douglas Pike for a new central turning lane that is not there today. So that would get some folks out of the flow of traffic. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this area. There's 4-lane highway, so 2 in each direction, 2 northbound, 2 southbound. There is currently, if somebody wants to turn into this plaza, for instance, they may just be blocking that left lane. So we're now providing a central turn lane in here in this area. And so that's a new improvement that is part of this as well. As far as George Washington Highway, I'm going to shift it over real quick. As far as George Washington Highway, we've got a new dedicated turn lane in here. Again, it has a right turn lane to be able to come into the site as well. And then we've got some new dedicated here as well. Again, Mr. Bannon will be here. Paul Bannon will be here from Beta Group. He did comprehensive analysis on this. So I just wanted to give a quick overview of it because I thought it was also important to be able to give it the full flow of what was going on for the site. As far as phasing, we put it on the plan. Peter Kelty from Wharton Group is here also to speak more about the phasing, but we wanted to demonstrate on the plan as well. We've got 4 possible phases on here. So we broke up the large building. We have a phase 1 of a 700,000, phase 2, 150, phase 3, 150, and then the front building, 120,000 as well. As far as future work, I did want to say as well, we will continue to, we did address the town peer review comments. I'm not sure if there would be any additional, but if there were, we'd be sure to continue to work with the town on any peer review comments. We did attend the technical review committee meeting and gathered feedback. There was nothing that we felt needed to modify the plan too much. And as far as we'll continue to work with the Department of Environmental Management on wetlands and the Department of Transportation for the physical alteration permit as well. That was kind of my overview. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Do we have any questions for Mr. Prevey? Public comment will be after. Thank you.
I know there are some people who are interested in the use of the material that's on site now and how that's handled with DEM. If maybe Mr. Prevey could address that.
As you probably know, there were some, there was a pretty large quantity of soil on the property that had levels of arsenic above the level allowed by Rhode Island DEM, which has the lowest level, 7 parts per million in the country. And so after discussing the matter, submitting various remediation plans, the department has approved what we've been doing for some time, is that taking the, some of the material was not above the limit of 7. Some was between 8.5 and 9. And then there were some that were 14. I believe the level in Massachusetts is 18. In any event, the material that exceeded 7, quite a bit of it has already been mixed with clean material on the site, and it's been compacted, and the mixing has resulted in soils that are below 7. They've been tested and are tested on a regular basis as they are being mixed. DEM visits the site on a regular basis to inspect. PAR Engineering is on site testing the material on a regular basis, and of course keeping all those records and tests being submitted to DEM. So at this point, the remediation is well underway, and it's all, as I said, been approved and inspected, etc., by DEM and PAR Engineering. The DEM recently informed us that once that material, when the material that's been mixed, once it's all been mixed, is non-jurisdictional and could be moved from the site if necessary. We don't anticipate that particularly right now, but after everything is spread and compacted and the building is excavated, for the foundation and utilities, could be some excess material. So out of an abundance of caution, we requested and received an approval from DEM indicating that after the material's mixed, in fact, it could leave the site as non-jurisdictional. As an aside, the level of for soil is 7 parts per million. And I questioned DEM at a meeting as to why the regulation in regard to compost, which Mr. Despers has been making for decades, which I use in my garden. I think it's the best you can ever get. I asked them why the regulation for soil that you walk on is 7 parts per million, but the regulation for compost is 40. If you can make any sense out of that, you're smarter than I am. But anyway, it's moving along. They've approved everything, and we're completely in compliance. We'd be happy to ask you any questions if you have any. Oh, by the way, the soil came from first NBC dig 300 feet down. It's crushed stone, and it had, some of it had high levels of arsenic, which is a, a naturally occurring mineral, which you can find anywhere. You probably find it in your backyard if you dug a hole. Be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Board have any questions at this time?
I had finished my presentation. I'd be happy again to answer any questions. I tried to give a thorough enough overview of everything, at the same time leave opportunity for any questions. And I'll be here. I mean, if there's, I'll be here tonight. I'll even be here for the next meeting as well. If there's things that you want to think over, I'll be here.
Yes. Is there an idea or an estimate on time between phases? Or is it really don't really know?
No, we actually have somebody that will talk about the phasing as well.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, okay.
Good.
The cut and fill percentage, is it fill, is it cut, or is it just basically balanced?
We've been working to balance the site, right on site.
So
Again,
any material that we were talking about is being dug up, it would remain on site for the most part.
correct. Yeah, that's what we've been working on from the get-go. As you can imagine, we would need some import of some topsoil material. There isn't a lot of topsoil that's there today, so we would need to import some topsoil, but we've worked to balance the site the best we can, yeah.
If we have no more questions, then we'll take your next presenter, please.
Mr. Kilty is with Wharton, has been very active in regard to contact with potential tenants, and has been doing this for quite a few years. And it's going to speak to the potential for phasing. The phasing issue would obviously depend on the request or requirements for a tenant. As Mr. Kilty will tell you, we have several tenants, potential tenants that are interested in this building, the project, and depending on which tenant decides to take it, the size of what they take will, determine whether there's a phasing of the building.
Hi, everyone. Peter Kilty, K-I-L-T-Y, Wharton Equity Partners, owner's representative. Just to address the question on the phasing, it's a good one. I think anybody who's seen any of this plan and some of our preliminary application meetings and things of that nature, we didn't necessarily have the lines shown on the plan to show phasing for the 1 million square foot building in particular. What we have found out, just working with our brokerage teams, seeing tenants who have come into the area, there is a number of tenants who are in the market for smaller square footages, but want the entire site solely to be their own. So we did this strictly in a way to reserve the right to build a smaller building if in fact a tenant comes on and just wants 600 or 700,000 square feet as opposed to 1 million and would want to take the whole site for their safety, security, and close off the site. The building breakdown that we have right now, 700,000 feet, and then leaving 300 plus or minus 300,000 square feet could be broken up into 2 sections, which we're calling phase 2 and 3 on the back side of the building. But I do want to be clear, all of the stormwater management, the ground improvements, and the conditions of the overall site work aspect of the project will be completed as part of one phase. So it's not like we can't build a parking lot, a stormwater basin, an egress corridor around the building. All of those improvements would be done. The phasing is strictly just for the vertical construction. Any questions that I can help?
I have a question about energy. It's 1 million square feet of building potentially. You're going to need heating, air conditioning, lighting. I brought it up at the conceptual and the master plan phase. Has your company considered use,
Sorry, I'm sorry. I thought you were going to question about solar. That's a question you brought up
I
last
was going to ask the Wharton.
night. Yes, go ahead.
Has your company taken into consideration with a building this size potentially and the roof, which I understand is going to have to handle HVAC, solar generation?
We typically, it's tenant by tenant basis. Obviously, a lot of tenants have energy efficient initiatives. It's just hard for us to predict in this stage to commit to one thing or another. Certain tenants who want to own the building long-term or potentially purchase the building for that matter don't like the solar panels on the roof because when you go to replace the roof, it's extremely difficult on a building this size. Also, the question about the HVAC and the air conditioning, we build a fair amount of buildings around the country that only have heating. This particular building, depending on when it actually comes out of the ground, right now, if we were to build it, it would be the 2018 International Building Code. So the insulation values on this building, as opposed to something that was building 10, 15, 20 years ago, the thermal envelope of this building is much greater, using less energy with LED lighting. So believe it or not, there is a chance that a building of this size could actually have same or a similar power plant infrastructure and electrical switchgear as some 100 and 200,000 square foot buildings did a long time ago. So, sorry, I can't answer the solar question directly right now, but.
Thank you.
Mr. Mona, to follow up on that, I'm sorry.
So going back to the rooftop units, there is a hotel right adjacent to it. So what are the acoustical requirements for that HVAC systems, the rooftop units?
Yeah, we have to do an acoustical study for the property. We've produced one as well as an air pollution study. Those are just two parts of the criteria that we look at. On the top of the wall, we have somewhere between a 3 and a 4 foot parapet wall, which we would put on the top, which helps baffle some of that sound going up. There's two different scenarios. If we were going heat only, it's a Cambridge gas-fired unit, similar to, if we're going heat only on the building, we use a unit called a Cambridge gas-fired unit. It has a small igniter burner, almost like your fireplace would. I call them pretty simplistic units because they just use outside air mixed with heat blowing in. Those are relatively quiet units. Air conditioning units on larger buildings like this are typically split out at using DX units. We use a number of smaller units just because the area is so big, so we split those up. Lab buildings and things like that use DOAS units, which are larger units, creating centralized air, constant volume, more noise.
So it's really going to be based on the tenant, what they're going to want and
It
what
is.
they're going to use.
It is, yeah.
If it's
Even-
straight warehouse, a lot of times they don't use AC.
Oftentimes, yeah. A lot of it depends on their product that they're storing as well. All right, thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Sorry to interrupt, but I did just want to add, Mr. Moan, that I know that the company, and I've been involved somewhat, is looking at solar for the roof. As Mr. Kilty indicated, it would depend on the tenant, but it is certainly an option on the table at this point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next witness would be Mr. Carter, our landscape architect. And he will present, obviously, the landscaping plan and answer any questions you might have.
Excuse me. Thank you. My name's John Carter. I'm a registered landscape architect. My office is 960 Boston Neck Road, Narragansett. I've been working with the team and collaborating on the site design from the beginning of this project. I have been in front of your board at the master plan level. At that point, we presented a master plan. We spent some time, typically when we're brought on board, we spend some time doing a site analysis to look at the site, look at the context, look at the neighboring uses, and look at the existing conditions. And that's usually more focused on trying to identify anything significant that would be worthy of preservation. As you know well, this site really was heavily managed, excavation, material storage, and so forth. So there's really nothing on the site of value in terms of forest cover, large trees, anything like that. We did look at the adjacent properties, and again, as you know, it's bounded by roads on 3 sides, on Route 7 and 116, and then Lydia Drive to the sort of northeast corner. We've prepared detailed landscape plans, which have been submitted. You have them in your package, and we have them here. I'm going to address I'm going to speak to this plan just because of the scale of the site. Our site plans are broken up into 5 different sheets. They're detailed. They have specifications for numbers, sizes, species of plants, locations. And I'd be certainly happy to go into that depth, but I'm not going to do that unless you ask me to, because I don't want to take up any more time than necessary. The original master plan was primarily focused on the views of this project from the adjacent streets, as well as to the views to the building, and also views to the parking areas. What changed from the master plan to this is the building to the lower left. I can't read the number on it. On Route 7 was moved back considerably from the road, and the parking that's between the building and the road is automobile parking. So some of the qualities of this is that the truck parking, the loading areas, and have all been, and the buildings are more in the center of the site. We try to keep the sort of pedestrian scale activities such as the automobile parking, the circulation road, and so forth on the exterior of the site. So when we designed our plans, we tried to pay attention as best we could and adhere as best we could to the landscape ordinance. Some of it doesn't apply to this economic growth overlay. However, we met it to the best we could, and I believe we actually were able to meet all of the requirements. I'll go through briefly the requirements and how we did meet them. So under the zoning ordinance 9.14.16, landscaping and screening standards, general screening, so that's just where screening is required by the ordinance, and it says that it should be ensure the screening is appropriate, shall be evaluated by height, material quality, opaqueness, and it should be at least 50% opaque throughout the year. So that obviously references evergreens versus deciduous trees. The planting that we have meets that requirement. And again, it's all detailed on one of the sheets, on all the sheets. There's plant schedules that spell all that out. I won't go into it now again, unless you ask me to. The next thing is street trees. And so it talks about a deciduous canopy tree per every 40 feet of street frontage. So street frontage would be where the site over here meets Route 7, where the site over here meets 116, and then the site over here abuts some of the Lydia Drive. And so we were able to meet the one tree per 40 feet of frontage. And that's shown in more detail. These are graphic, but we did plant trees all along there, trees along Route 7, and trees up in that back area there where that small piece abuts the Lydia Drive area. The next section has to do with parking lot landscaping and screening. And it says, all parking and loading areas fronting on collector streets in the Economic Growth Overlay District, and all parking and loading areas abutting residential uses shall provide, and it goes on. And number one, a landscaped area at least 6 feet wide along a public street or sidewalk. So that would be this area that I'm pointing to on Route 7, and that's far in excess of 6 feet. It's 170 feet to the parking lot, and then 310 feet to the building. Over here on 116 is existing green plus proposed planting, and that's far in excess of 6 feet also. Screening at least 3 feet in height, and again, this is specific to the parking lot, landscaping and screening. So again, we have plenty of details to show, but we've got evergreen plantings along Route 7. We've got low shrub planting along the edge of the parking areas, on both parking areas, and then interior planting also. So the parking areas are heavily screened. One street tree for every 25 linear feet of parking lot frontage along collector or residential use. Excuse me, or doesn't read right, but along the collector street for residential use. We don't have any residential use abutting this site. There is a hotel here, and we did plant a fairly extensive evergreen planting there of some large spruce and white pines to help break up the two uses. And then lastly, they have requirements for interior landscaping. I'm not going to go through them in detail, but one of them has to do with the site, how many proposed parking spaces, and then the fact that if you have a parking lot with more than 100 spaces, we're required to have 360 square feet of landscaping for each 25 spaces. On my plans, there is a chart to explain how we met all that, and interior is pretty much islands in the middle, the corners, and so forth. So it has to do with sort of breaking up the expanses of asphalt and providing interior planting. It provides shade to break up some of the heat island effects, as well as an aesthetic value. In addition, we've provided landscaping along, this is the wetland area I think Eric talked about, and that's in front of DEM, I believe now. And there were requirements to have plantings of native plantings, and that was done in conjunction with the wetland biologist. So our plans also represent or specify the plantings that would go in that area and then over in this area, also where it's within the wetland perimeter buffer. And then lastly, there's a requirement in the ordinance for open space. It talks about usable open space shall be required within the Economic Growth Overlay District. The design should encourage comfortable and safe pedestrian use, including landscaping, seating areas, and it should be developed in a comprehensive system of open space throughout the entire site. So we have pedestrian sidewalks that are interior to the site because of the scale of it, so that people can walk if they're on break or if they're out walking to a store, a bus stop or something like that. So there are pedestrian sidewalks within the interior of the site, and we've got some outside seating areas so that people can use them if they go out for a break or something like that. The requirement is 5%. So the site is 92.2 acres, and the 5% requirement would be 4.61 acres of open space. We've provided 29.4 acres, which is 31%. So the required open space is far in excess of what the requirements are of the ordinance. I believe in general that I've covered everything. I'd be happy to answer questions or.
Can we please have complete silence while our presenter is presenting? Thank you very much.
I didn't get that question, I'm sorry.
I just asked everyone to remain silent while you're presenting.
Oh, thank you. But I'm finished, so maybe I'm finished, excuse me. Yeah, thank you. So we were asked to, we drew a cross-section, there you go, from Route 7, right here, through the site, through the parking area, and to the building, to show the relationship between the road, the building, and what the views would look like. So that's drawn to scale, so we're able to measure off it. I know you can't read it, I'll give you clearly, but I'll give you some of the sort of important measurements. So Route 7, and in that area, there's actually a sidewalk. And this is a drainage, rip-wrap drainage structure. This is a detention basin, sand filter, which will be grassed. And up here, we have a parking lot that extends from here. That's an island down the middle of the parking lot that we cut through in this cross-section, then the building. So that's the parking lot. The distance is from the sidewalk to the parking lot is 170 feet. From the sidewalk to the building is approximately 310 feet. The elevation change is from the sidewalk elevation to the parking lot is 22 feet approximately of elevation change. And then the building at this point is being specified at 40 feet tall. So it's drawn to represent 40 feet tall. So the distance from the sidewalk to the top of the building would be 62 feet, this vertical distance like that. If you draw a sight line from the car or the sidewalk or from an automobile, there's a variety of plantings that will help to buffer and mitigate some of the view of the building. And we have some extensive lower evergreens along the edge of the parking lot. And the intent of them is to screen the cars that are in the parking lot from the users of the road. So we put that together just to demonstrate what that view would look like from Route 7 up towards the parking lot, up towards the building. But now I believe I am done. I'm certainly will answer questions if you have any.
The cross-section, is that building 1?
I have. Yes, it is. I couldn't read the building numbers. Yes, building 1.
How tall is building 2?
The same, 40 feet.
Does anyone have any more questions?
The elevation of building 1 compared to the other buildings?
The-
Similar?
I'd have to go to another plan to get that. Maybe Eric probably has the topography.
So the rear building, the one, the million square foot building is at elevation 372. So that's shown as 360, right, 372. So it's,
This is 360?
that's the front building, in building number 1 in the front. Building number 2 in the rear is 372. So it's about 11 feet taller, 12 feet taller.
And how about the elevation if one was on 116 looking towards building 2?
Yeah. We don't have the cross section drawn for that, but it would be the same. I can, hold on a second. Yeah, with the elevation, yep. I'll get a grade elevation up there. So the grade at the nearest corner to building 2 out in the street is about 360. Out at the street. So the street elevation is 360 at George Washington, and the building is at 372 is the foundation.
Excuse me, on the same track there, do you know roughly what 295 is?
I can try.
Like at the corner?
Yep. So 295, I'm looking at sheet 20. I don't know if you actually have your whole set, but sheet 20, I am showing 295 around. It's like about 350 or so. It looks like about 350 if I'm reading the topography correct. Maybe a little bit more, actually. 354 is over towards the corner over there.
And you said that the
The building's at
finished floor of the building number 2 is what?
372.
372.
Yep. Finished floor, correct, yeah.
About 18 feet of sort of finished floor and then, yeah.
Ain't no tree that big.
Any more questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, we do not have any further witnesses this evening. As I indicated, Mr. Bannon was unable to make it, but would be available for a future meeting. I assume you're going to open it up to the public at this point? Okay, I'd just like to say a few words after that. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions for any of the presenters before I open the public hearing? Hearing none, at this time, we will open the public hearing, 7:25 PM. I'd ask that if you'd like to speak, you come up, please speak clearly, state your name.
Good evening. Frank O'Connor, Lakeside Drive. This is certainly a long, hard-fought, a lot of money and effort's been spent. The team's put a lot of effort into it. This looks like a worthwhile project. I have one question related to the water. It looks like it's about 92 acres in site, and based on a rough calculation, it looks like the roof area.
Mr. O'Connell, can you please direct your questions up here, and then we'll have them.
Okay. Looks like the roof area is 26 acres about, and when you look at the paved area, multiply that by 2.25 probably. So you're looking roughly 50, 60 acres that could generate runoff. The current area is absorbing some degree of water. So the question I have is what absorptive capacity of the site is being removed? I'm going to give you a little background behind the question. That feeds into the Woonasquatucket River watershed and ultimately into Georgiaville Pond, which has a high hazard dam. And we already have algae blooms there in the summertime for the town beach. So any water that's added to that flow through that comes from a commercial site is not necessarily the same as running off woodland. So I'd like to know what absorptive capacity is being removed. And then when they did the 1 in 100 percentile, commonly called a 100-year flood, but it's really a 1% chance of exceedance. That can happen any year. It's not 1 in 100. It's a chance of exceedance. What would that added volume be going into Georgiaville Pond? Thank you.
Thank you. Eric, please, Mr. Prevey.
Eric Prevey again. Yeah, so I tried to detail the stormwater process. We had provided the analysis for that. One of our requirements under the law is to ensure that the stormwater is all mitigated on site. So it's treated, held on site, and metered back out at pre-development levels. So we're required to do that by law for the 1, 2 through 100-year storm. So we provided that. We provided the calculations. As I mentioned, it's a 2-volume stormwater report. So it's a combination of underground. So there's underground storage, holding that extra stormwater on site, metering it back out at pre-development levels. Also, we've got some of the detention basins on site as well. So they're providing some water quality and then metering back out at pre-development levels. We've also shown that the volume, again, rate is one thing, right? So metering it back out, but also that the volume is a decrease as well, which is important, as mentioned, for downstream impacts and such. So we've provided all those calculations. Those calculations are reviewed by peer reviewer, the town's peer reviewer. They're reviewed by the town engineer. They're reviewed by the Department of Environmental Management's engineer. They'll be reviewed by the Department of Transportation's engineer. So there are a lot of reviews that are looking at this along the way. This is not in a bubble. But we have provided all of those as well. So I do also want to just say that, as I mentioned when I started, this is not a wooded site. I mean, this is a site today that is mostly clear today, and there's stormwater that's coming off of that today. It's not like when you have a wooded site and you're taking it and changing it to impervious as well. So there is a substantial amount of runoff that is coming off today. But again, we have metered them all to pre-development levels. So we do not have any increases to any of the storms that are required by law.
Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, I was asked to provide a little more on how it's being held and how it's being treated. So on site, we have either the system of the roof leaders themselves. So the building itself has roof leaders and able to put that directly into the system. So that's good. We don't have the nuisance runoff coming off anymore. So sometimes when you see it rolling off the side, it becomes runoff, right? But if we're able to grab it at the roof leaders, it's put directly into the system. So that is, as mentioned, it is 22 acres of rooftop. Able to put that directly right into the ground. That's not even becoming runoff that's going across the site. We also have, as I mentioned, multiple underground systems, very, very large underground systems that can hold that stormwater and then meter that back out. We also have proprietary water quality systems to be able to treat those and take the particles out, the total suspended solids, and to take all of that as well to make sure that we're treating that to the state levels as well. So we have that through a system of catch basins, so traditional catch basins that pick it up on the asphalt, breaking it into the smallest watersheds possible. Again, trying to minimize, you don't want an end treatment, you don't want this large string of all of this large pipe going to a central one. So we've broken it up into a lot of little, smaller little watersheds that have catch basins going to areas that are treating and holding and metering it back out. So.
Very good, thank you.
Anthony Capo, Fiberglass Fabricators Incorporated, 964 Douglas Pike. 14 months ago, I stood right there, and it was stipulated by the committee that a site visit was to transpire at my facility, but with the Dupree engineers. The chairman specifically had the engineer stand up and say he would meet me at my office. That never happened, okay? So we'll let that one go. It's expected. At same meeting, I also coined the phrase default engineering, okay? And with the help of Mr. Prevey, we're going to show an example. If he can open up the drainage diagram, the 32-page document that they have put together. Have that? Okay. Sheet 16 of the Dupree environmental runoff study. Let's go to sheet 16. Okay. (16 of 32).
That's a different one. We don't have it with us. Do you have a copy of it?
I have it right here in my head. Let's go to sheet 16 of 32. I'd like to talk about that
I
sheet.
don't believe we have 16
Okay,
with us
well,
here.
that's why Mr. Prevey seemed to be the man with the computer. I mean, that's why I turned to him just for technological. I have no idea what to do over
Do you
there.
happen to have it, Mike?
Okay. We don't have it on the PowerPoint.
I don't think that would be up to them.
I
Mr.
mean,
Privy, do you have that?
it's the crux of the development.
You have it? Okay.
Okay, here we go.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. On the left-hand side where your cursor is, marker 299. You can't read it, but there's 299. Okay? That's my driveway. Okay? Marker 299 is my driveway. There is the pipe right below, north of 299 marker. There is a note on that drawing that says the ditch. First of all, I take exception to the word the ditch. That's my driveway. We worked too hard to have it named a ditch. Secondly, it says the pipe is to be extended. Where are they going to extend it? How much further into our property are they going to extend that pipe? Simple question. The drawing begs the question. So that's my example of default. And the answer, obviously, I'm not getting an answer from anybody, okay? But if we follow. Okay, go right ahead. No, I'm taking my stuff with me. Thank you.
So the extension that we're referring to is because of the widening that happens with it's nothing on the down gradient side on his property side. Everything that we're extending, you can see it, it's a darker color. So the lighter color gray is the existing pipe, and that's where the edge of where the edge of pavement is today. That's where that flared end, that pipe is. So hold on, I have a cursor I can.
So you're saying it's being extended onto
Ours, it's not.
onto their
ours.
property, not theirs?
No, so his property right here is not, we're not touching the pipe. We're not touching this pipe whatsoever. The extension is because with this turning, sorry, I put it through, Mr. Chairman. So with the extension, in order to create that right turn lane out, we're actually widening the existing pavement in this area. So we have to extend that flared end, and we're creating a small head wall right here. So it's on our property. That's where we're extending it. We're not extending it on a down gradient side. We're extending it right here, this one segment here that is currently at the edge of pavement. By the time we move this edge of pavement to create that turn lane, we have to extend the pipe with it. So that's what we're doing. That's the extension that we're talking about.
Thank you.
I appreciate that the the notation is specifically on my side, so that is an honest, assumption on my end. It's pointing right at my driveway on my side. So put the arrow on your side, not on my side, okay? That's what I'm saying. The default engineering, okay? Read the 16 previous pages. All the pipes, one way or another, they lead to that basin. In turn, the water still runs through the pipe down the middle of my property, okay? That's the end result of that. They're defaulting to an existing pipe. Now, we can talk about the debris study of the CFS that they have brought up here a couple times, okay? I would receive numerous copies of this via certified mail. I got a cover letter with it, and the cover letter signed by Mr. Kelly has a couple things in it. First of all, he says, I'm complaining, okay? Quote, I'm complaining. I'm not complaining. I am merely describing a condition that is being perpetrated on our 6 acres. Not complaining, just telling you what's happening. A site visit would have been nice to talk about. He goes on to say, quote unquote, Mr. Despres has nothing to do with this pipe, quote unquote. I take exception to that. Mr. Despres has utilized this pipe his entire professional career. He has litigated that pipe specifically, and now he's incorporating it into his plans. That's hardly nothing to do with it, okay? So we will go to the second page after the letter, and it talks about the CFS. 26.99 is their benchmark of CFS, cubic feet per second. I am saying that that is today's CFS. I am asking, and I will ask at every turn, that that CFS be turned back. It needs to be reset. There has been unmitigated development on his side to create that 26.99 CFS starting point, okay? The pipe has changed. The road grade has changed. The development around it, 7-Eleven grade has changed. Hampton has changed. Lores and the Shell have all changed. Getchell is the only one that hasn't changed its grade. Therefore, we have a CFS of 26.99 today. I'm asking for a reset on that number. Why not use the CFS of the previous pipes that were previously noted tonight? You're saying there's a 15-inch pipe? I bet you it's bigger than 15-inch, but I can probably crawl through it. So it's got to be bigger than 15. Why don't we go back to the 12-inch pipe that was noted tonight 10 years ago or whatever they say? Let's go back 30 years ago to the 6-inch pipe, okay? I'm saying that the CFS, the reset, where this should be on this page should be around 5 CFS. Start there, not 26.99. Start at 5. Now start your planning, okay? Cut 59% off 5 CFS. And I'm still going to say the same thing. You got 41% of the way to go. So I'm asking for a reset. I take total exception to this deep number right here of 26.99. It's an invalid starting point. I'm not without a solution, though. If you take a look at the 7-Eleven property, Plat 46, Lot 236, there is a hard piping. There is an egress that was put there many, many years ago where Hampton City Road comes up from the backside. That egress was established way back in the 70s, okay? When 7-Eleven, I call it the 7-Eleven property, when Lot 236 was developed, they tied in. They did the right thing. The parking lot drains correctly. It drains right down behind it. There's the 30-foot swath there. There's the 2-rod width that's required. I'm saying this, take that pipe that's right there, move it 150 feet north, take an egress and run it right down between Getchell and 964 Douglas Pike. It comes into the confluence of all those pipes behind Blanche River Foam. It's a simple job. I'm not paying for it. He should pay for it, but needs to do that. You can't just start with 26.99 and say, that's what we're starting today. That's fraudulent. It's not 26.99. It should be, let's go back 15 years ago. Let's go to 1964. His sign says 1964. Let's go back to that date. What size plate was there when that was a cow path? Probably about this big. Let's use that CFS. The volume has changed dramatically, and it's based upon, partially on development around it, but solely on the unmitigated development of Smithfield P property at this point. So thank you very much, and I will be here at every turn because this needs to stop. It's harming my business, and I just need some relief. Thank you.
Thank you.
As I'm sure you probably know, the pipe Mr. Capo was referring to in Route 7 was installed by the Department of Transportation. Mr. Despres had absolutely nothing to do with it. I don't know what Mr. Capo was referring to as far as development. The site's been disturbed for decades, and it hasn't changed. We did make our best efforts, given the pipe that's there, to reduce the flow going forward, which we have rather dramatically, I would suggest. In fact, excuse me,
Sir.
I didn't interrupt you. And in fact, when DOT put the drainage in Route 7, they actually destroyed a pipe that Mr. Despres had coming from one of his detention basins, which we finally got them after years to correct. Mr. Capo's problem is caused, if it's caused by the DOT pipe, you should approach DOT about it to see how it can be mitigated. As he said, it's been there for quite a while. We haven't had anything to do with it. And we're trying to reduce, to the best of our ability, the water that's going through there now. And that's about the best we can do. We have tried to address this issue, and we've done the best we can from an engineering point of view.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public who would like to speak? Just one moment.
He glossed over the fact that he is just pounding his chest over the reductions, the massive reductions that he is providing me. Don't do me any favors. You are starting at a CFS that is just not correct. You need to start at a CFS that the clock, it needs to be reset. You cannot use today's CFS. It is an unfair advantage to his client.
I do just have one question for you. Have you contacted DOT at all regarding, have you contacted DOT or the town regarding this drainage issue prior to the first meeting about this project, or when Laura's was being built, or when the hotel was being built?
Fell on deaf ears.
So you did contact the town?
It fell on deaf ears.
Did you contact the town?
The DOT, DEM, both of them. I have letters from them falling on deaf ears. Meritless, they call it. It's not meritless. It is scarring 2.5, 3 acres out of 6.
Good, Ken.
So why do you feel, okay, if as Mr. Kelly has said, okay, The pipe was put in by DOT, okay? DOT put the pipe in. It's their responsibility to take care of this pipe that you're having issues with. And you're saying that it fell on deaf ears. Why do you feel that this project should take precedence and correct it when it's not their pipe? Tell me why you feel that it should be corrected. Well, why should they correct it when the pipe was put in by DOT?
It's his water. That's why he needs to correct it.
How is it his water? It's a natural
Wait a minute. We have a common enemy. I have my water. I will take care of mine. You take care of yours, okay? It's a common enemy. You need to take care of your own water. Every other surrounding business has taken care of their own water. Nobody, show me a development anywhere that has this little confluence to be put to the use for an applicant. There is none,
Actually,
okay?
I can tell you with all assurance that it actually happens all the time where,
Give me the address.
where water does flow onto somebody's property, and even if they develop it, they have to deal with the fact that for years that water has flowed onto that property. You can't stop it at that point.
And I am sure, you show me
Mike,
the
what is that
order of
called?
magnitude.
It's called a certain type of easement, I believe. Prescriptive easement.
Mm-hmm.
So it happens, and again, unfortunately, it has to be dealt with. Now, at this point, what they're saying is that they are not going to allow more water than what's flowing to flow.
And what I'm saying is that the premise that they're beginning with, the 26.99, is today's rate. That needs to be reset. They have reset that pipe and that topography so many times. Why do they get to randomly choose today's high rate? Why can't we choose the 1991 rate? Why can't we choose the 12-inch pipe rate, not the 15-inch rate? The 12-inch was there before. He litigated it up when it happened. Let's go back to the 12. We all know the 12 was there. Start with the 12 CFS.
I mean, I guess what's being said here, though, is the fact that it wasn't changed from the 12-inch pipe to now, okay? The CFS got worse from what you're saying.
Absolutely.
From then to now.
Yes.
DOT did nothing about it. But at this point, this project is going to do something about it. So if you can't blame him for what's already happened.
I can certainly stand here and say whatever I want to say, and I am saying.
You certainly can.
And I am saying that premise of 26.99 is just it's a grab. It's a grab at today's rate. That needs to be reset. So, if it means litigation, it means litigation. But, like I said, I don't care if he puts up Disney World, okay? But you can't pee down my leg and now tell me it's just raining, because that's what he's doing.
Thank you. Mr. Kelly, just let's not do a back and forth here.
No,
We've all said our piece, so.
No. I have no intention of doing that, although I don't appreciate getting interrupted. Mr. Chairman, at this point, we don't have any further witnesses tonight. I'm going to ask the board if it would consider a special meeting as opposed to waiting till the next meeting next month. So we could move this along. As I said, we have some interested tenants who obviously the completion of this hearing on the preliminary would be very helpful in moving the matter ahead.
Well, we'll definitely entertain that. I just want to make sure there's no one else from the public who wants to speak.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you had been finished.
No, I'll leave the public hearing open for the next meeting, but I just want to make sure no one else wants to speak at this time. So is there anyone else from the public who would like to speak for or against this project? Okay, hearing none at this time. We will leave the public hearing open, 7:51. And at this time, Mike, are we looking to, is this something we'll have to get back to everybody for the special meeting, or?
Get to the specific date.
Okay. Okay. What is the date of the next meeting? June 15th? What's the board's pleasure on June 1?
Why couldn't this go to just the next planning board agenda?
I don't know what the next agenda is. Mike, do we know?
I mean,
Is it?
It would,
Do you know what as far as the agenda itself, is it a heavy agenda or is it?
if I may, I anticipate the next meeting being a lengthy meeting. We'll be presenting the traffic information. I don't know what Mr. Conti's intent is, but I think it's safe to say that it'll probably be a longer, much longer than this.
This is to Mike and council. Do we have to have the special meeting on a Thursday, or is it something that that could be a convenience for the members, where if that Thursday, June 1, isn't convenient for everybody, whether it be the Wednesday? I know that week, I believe, is a council meeting on the 5th. Yes. Okay. Donna, do you know?
Council is actually considering a work session on the 1st, but it's not part of it.
What about the 8th or the 7th?
Mr. Chairman, would it be in part having that additional information at the same time? I mean, yeah.
Yes.
Well, it's not, I mean, we suggested that we would have that information, so trying to have this meeting sooner, I'm not sure if that's actually helpful or not.
So, Mr. Kelly, what Rick asked was if
Well,
you anticipate having any of the information by that meeting.
I can't guarantee it because I can't guarantee DEM's schedule, of course. I've been told that they are going to move it along as quickly as they can, and the best estimate I got from them was 2 to 3 weeks.
I'm sorry, what was it?
2 to 3 weeks.
2 to 3 weeks?
So if I push them, I would, which I have been trying to get this concluded.
So the 8th would be 3 weeks.
Yeah. So that might well come out.
The 15th is the 4th week. Mr. Kelly, from what I'm hearing, it seems as though everybody wants to keep it on the agenda for the 15th.
Understood, Mr. Chairman. I thank you for considering it.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we continue the still water distribution for the June 15th meeting for further presentation.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
think it's that business. He's been coming, he's got a hobby. Can't you tell?
Huh? Yes. Frustrating issues.
Yeah.
But that rating's
You never did that before?
Next on the agenda, Sun Builders, ID number 23-02, informational meeting, continued from April 20th, 2023. Major land development, master plan review, AP 35, lots 1, 1A, 1D, and 2, 270 Putnam Pike, 8.49 acres, highway commercial zone, applicant Sun Builders, Inc., owners Sun Builders, Inc. and Clover Leaf RET LLC, engineer Crossman Engineering.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm going to try and be brief.
Tim, hold on one second, please. I'm sorry. We'll just let them finish their exit.
So.
Thank you.
Thank you. For the record, I'm Tim Kane and I represent Sun Builders, the applicant, and I'm going to try and be brief because we put a presentation on last month, and I believe you folks had a site visit since that time, and we're back before you. Just to refresh your memory, we introduced the testimony of Brian King, who's the professional engineer from Dupree for this project. You heard from John Chevelin, who's the traffic engineer from PAR Engineering or Peer Engineering. He walked you through the traffic report. You had a few questions from my client, David Lafredo, and he answered them. And again, you conducted a site visit. We have Mr. King back tonight. We have Mr. Shovin with us, and in case you have any questions of him or you want additional testimony. And as you know, we're at the beginning of the process. It's master plan approval. And if you see fit to grant master plan, we move on to the zoning board for a special use permit and dimensional variances, and that will involve a public hearing and notice to abutters. And if we get through the zoning process, then we have to engineer the project, which is the stage that you just heard before you. And when it's fully engineered, we come back before you. So I'm not going to say anything else. I know there's a lot of people here, and I don't think they're here on my project. I think they're waiting. So we're going to try and be as brief as possible. If you have any questions for our engineer or for our traffic engineer or for Mr. Lofredo, we'll be glad to answer them. You do have I believe, a positive staff review from the planning board and a positive recommendation, and we would ask for approval tonight so we can move forward in the process.
Thank you, Mr. King. Do you have any other presentations? Okay. At this point, does anybody from the board have any questions regarding this project from anything you saw on the site visit? Or any other questions at all? And if not, at this time, we can go back to the public hearing and you can think about some more questions that you may have. If there's no questions from the board at this time, we're going to reopen the public hearing, 8:01 PM. Is there anybody from the public who would like to speak about this project? I'll ask once more, is there anyone who would like to speak about this project? Hearing and seeing none, we will close the public hearing at 8:01 PM. We've already done a site visit. So once again, I'll ask the board if there's any questions, comments.
Mr. Chairman, during the site visit, I was asked what stood out in my mind as possible concerns or areas of investigation. And so I went home and thought about it quite a bit. And one of the things that came to my mind was a comment made by the applicant that he was designing his private road to the fullest extent to conform to the existing topography as much as possible for engineering reasons. And in my mind, that was good. Considering that the amount of ledge up there and the rock and the existing natural topography and whatever, I would urge the applicant to keep that kind of focus in mind as he furthers the engineering on the site, to make use as much as possible the existing conditions to mitigate any kind of engineering problems, drainage problems, to use the site to the best he can do. He can utilize it to in its existing conditions. And from listening to him as we walked the site, that seems to be one of the principal focuses in his mind, is that how can I use the existing property to its fullest extent to mitigate any problems, whether it be existing ledge, existing vegetation that can be used in its current condition. And so that was one of the things that struck me as we walked the property. And the coordination between Johnston and Smithfield, I assume, is going to continue. And he's got a really interesting piece of property to develop, especially in the higher elevations. I don't know exactly what his residential component's going to look like, but could be interesting. Thank you. Just some comments.
Thank you, Mike.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Just to say on the sidewalk was extremely informative, and to what Mike's saying, because of the elevation, they really had a plan for every part of that property, how they were going to deal with it. And just one of the concerns was that elevation, was there going to be these really tall retaining walls, that type of thing, but they explained they're stepping it up and how they were going to make it, you were going to have these extremely large retaining walls, and what Mike was saying about keeping those features as natural as much as possible. So it was good. Yeah.
But in the same manner, mitigate any problems that could arise.
Thank you.
I had a concern that when you look at the Johnston Smithfield line, that the setback, that the building footprint of the new retail is actually right up against the property, the Smithfield line. and whether or not there really should be a setback from that property line that you really, I'm not sure if you can really take the whole property as a whole and whether or not it would, because it's two separate towns, that you would need a setback there.
I'm not sure how that works. I mean, I know of buildings that are half in Smithfield and half in Gloucester, and so I'm not really sure. Mike, do you have any insight on that?
Mr. Chairman?
Hold on one second. Because it's not a real property line, it's just showing where Johnston and Smithfield change. Okay,
Mr. Chairman?
go ahead. Mr. Vitale.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. You're dealing with a large parcel of land that straddles two towns, but he owns it all.
Correct.
And there is no requirement that, I don't believe there's any requirement that there should be a setback on his own property to divide the commercial portion from the residential portion.
It would probably only be if he intended on selling the Smithfield property.
Well, I mean, but that's.
But even, I don't know if even then,
If that happens, then, you know, the project that he's proposing before us is going to go down the tubes.
One thing that during the TRC committee meeting we had recently, the engineer did mention, and the owner, about the fact that the big retail building there may be moved back away from that because the tenant they were looking at had a much bigger footprint than they may otherwise have. I don't know if they want to address that point, but it was certainly brought up during our TRC meeting.
Hi, I'm Brian King from Crossman Engineering. Yes, at the TRC meeting, I was there, where we talked about the larger site that had the retail, and with this layout here, it had a specific user, which will likely not be that on that site in the future. So it'll be strictly retail, and the building that that we would be showing moving forward would be moved farther away from the property line. Right now, we're planning that building to be 30 feet from the town line, excuse me, from the town line. Where on this layout that was submitted, I think it was closer to 5 feet. So I'm going to move it 25 feet farther away from the town line.
thank you. He said they're probably going to move it 25 feet further away.
Do you pay taxes in both towns? So it is probably, somehow it's separated, right? So even though it's one property, it's still two separate properties. I mean, tax purposes. it is.
Tax purposes, yeah.
So could it be sold?
Could it be sold?
As two separate properties. I'm sorry, say it again. I'm sorry, say it again. Sorry.
Will have to be subdivided.
You can't decide to piecemeal a piece of property. So if it's not currently subdivided, in order to sell pieces of it, you have to get it subdivided. Otherwise, you're creating an illegal subdivision.
All right.
Well, they could sell pad sites though, correct? Correct. If it was all one parcel, but there were pad sites within the parcel, you can sell pad sites within the parcel. Okay.
Again, I just want to be clear, I was just bringing it up to, if you wanted to shift the building over a little bit to avoid.
It sounds like they're gonna
To
anyway,
avoid the
yeah.
whole situation, you know? I
Yeah, it
just-
sounds like they're gonna do it anyways.
Any other questions? Hearing none?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve Sun Builders Major Land Development Master Plan Review, ID number 33-03, AP 35 lots 1, 1A, 1D, and 2 at 270 Putnam Pike.
Yeah, go ahead. You can add that. With the,
In addition to the comments just made, we'd like to move for approval of the master plan based upon the evidence presented at the hearings, including that of the engineer that testified. The board would like to mark as Exhibit 1 the memorandum of the town planner, Michael Phillips, of May 8th, 2023, which the board accepts. Planning board also would like to condition the approval based upon a recommendation to the zoning board of review to grant the required special use permits and requested variances, that the planning board grant approval of the land development project as the record evidence supports the conclusion that the applicant has provided the board with sufficient evidence that the master plan submission can adequately mitigate impacts, and further that the approval is based on the findings of fact prepared by the town planner, which the planning board would like to mark as Exhibit B, with the following conditions. The applicant receives a required special use permit and variances from the zoning board of review. 2, the applicant obtain comments on the project from the town of Johnston. 3, that the applicant notifies the town of any discussions or meetings planned with RIDOT to discuss traffic mitigation and traffic signals. And 4, that a 5-foot sidewalk be approved along the access driveway from Route 44. Is there a second?
So moved. So moved.
we have a motion and a second. Do we have any more discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you, gentlemen. New business. Blue Feather Trail, ID number 23-06, public hearing, major subdivision, combined master and preliminary plan review, AP 12, lot 54, 0 Blue Feather Trail, 2 acres approximately, 3 lots, zone R20, applicant owner Trimart Development LLC, engineer Joe Casali, Engineering, Inc. First, we need to address the applicant's request for waivers of the roadway width, right-of-way width, cul-de-sac geometry, and for submission items required pursuant to the subdivision regulations and associated checklist requirements, including a waiver of the freshwater wetland alteration permit and site suitability determination.
Is this the same type of thing that's worth?
Mr. Levesque, would you like to embellish upon this, please?
The waivers we're talking about are not checklist items in this particular instance. They're actually looking for a waiver completely of the requirement. So the road width, they're going to build it less wide than required and so on and so forth. That's what they're asking for. The waivers are going to be to modify the project to build it the way they're suggesting rather than as required.
So we would be voting on this waiver completely. right now?
Yes, as part of the project, you would be addressing the entire project. The waivers that you're being requested are not a condition precedent to you proceeding with the hearing. So you can certainly decide the project and deny a waiver in the context of it, saying the road width has to be as required instead of what you're suggesting.
Okay, so we
it's not
don't
the
need a
same
vote
kind
now, we'll let them continue and
Correct.
decide at that point. Thank you.
There is a request to combine master and preliminary. I know you guys done that maybe once or twice before. You are allowed to do that in instances and projects that are ready to go. What that means is, as you know, master plan is a concept review. Preliminary plan is based on engineering. If a project comes before you and asks to combine both phases of review, you can do that so long as you're satisfied that the project has the engineering done and is ready to be considered at preliminary. And then you can also decide to just have a public hearing on the preliminary plan and the master plan combined, instead of breaking that out in phases. There is that request. You will need to address that upfront in order to know how to proceed from here.
Can we ask questions of the engineer real quick? Okay. Or
Good evening, Chairman. My name is Nicholas Goodyear. I'm here, the attorney on behalf of the applicant Trimar Development. I do have Mr. Casali, the engineer. He can discuss the fact that, well, let me walk that back. The hearing has been noticed at the preliminary level. So we have advertised and noticed it appropriately for master and preliminary. The reason why this is not a minor subdivision, it got thrust to major, is because waivers are required. The reason why waivers are required here is Blue Feather Trail is a private road. So that doesn't meet the standards here. Our proposal is to essentially have an extension off of a private road with another private road. So mirroring existing conditions of what exists at Blue Feather Trail. Actually, the standards here are higher than what exists out there, which what we're proposing. So Mr. Casali can walk you through some of those points, and we would request that you treat this as a combined master and preliminary review.
thank you.
Have specific questions on that, I think, as your solicitor indicated, you want to vote on that before we get going.
So I just had a quick question for Mr. Casali.
Sure.
Take your time.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, just for the record, my name's Joe Casali. I'm a registered professional engineer. Office is at 300 Post Road in Warwick.
Mr. Casali, you've obviously been before this board many times, so would you attest that the project is at the point that you would normally be at for master plan approval? I'm sorry, preliminary approval.
Yeah, we've received our DEM permit. Timing is everything. We actually got it this afternoon. So we have our freshwater wetlands permit. The fourth waiver we're going to be asking for the state permits that are outstanding. The one state permit is subdivision suitability determination, which was preceded on wetlands. So that will be submitted in the morning. We expect our subsuit within a week or two. But yeah, this is a 3-lot subdivision. Normally it would be minor. As you know, once you ask for a waiver, it's thrust up to major. And because the permits are in hand, we're asking for a combined master preliminary. And I will go through the waivers in detail, but realistically, the waivers we're asking for, there is no regulation, as you know, Mr. Chairman, in town to regulate private roadways. And so the only thing we can compare it to is a public roadway. And so whenever we deviate from those public standards, even though we're building a private road, out of an abundance of caution, we ask the town to grant a waiver for that.
What is the width of the current roadway, Blue Feather Trail?
It's variable. We've measured it anywhere from as thin as 16 to as wide as 22 feet. Staff is 13 to 18. What we're proposing is a 30-foot right-of-way instead of 50, and a 20-foot wide roadway instead of 30.
So wider than the current.
Wider than what exists there today, correct?
Okay. So I think at this point, I'm sorry.
I said to you that they're not asking for the same kind of waivers as before, and it's true as to the two of them. Road width and cul-de-sac configuration, those are waivers they're asking for that are permanent. They're never going to have to do it the way they're required if you grant those. The one waiver that they're asking for that's not a complete waiver, that they're going to have to comply with eventually, is site suitability. That one should be a condition of your approval if you go with combining preliminary and final.
Correct.
I'm sorry, master and preliminary. I wanted to make that clear.
And we would have it at final here anyway, so.
Yeah, you'd make your approval
Stipulation.
of preliminary conditional on site suitability, and then if they want to proceed to final, they better have it in hand.
Which, Mr. Casale, you said you think you'll have it about a week?
Yeah, and of course, we would stipulate that that would be a condition of approval. We don't get that from the state house.
Thank you. So at this time, I believe we need a motion to combine master and preliminary approval into this meeting. Unless anybody has any other questions, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ken.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that the board accept and combine master and preliminary plans submitted with the supported documents.
Thank you. We have a motion. Can we get a second, please? Motion and a second. Any more discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. Please continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Guys have already handled quite a docket this evening, so I'm going to hand it right over to the engineer, have you guys walk through the project. He's got a great presentation here. It's straightforward, creating 2 new lots. It's not too complicated. With a couple of waivers mixed in, he'll be able to walk you through that.
Thank you.
So again, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, good evening. If I may, just draw your attention to the PowerPoint. So we're here tonight for a 3-lot residential subdivision. You all know in terms of proximity where we are in the community, Pleasant View Avenue, Indian Run Trail, Blue Feather Trail, the Smithfield River, and that is the subject parcel, specifically Assessors Plat 12, Lot 54, entirely in the R20 zone. As it sits right now, it's a little bit shy, 2 acres, about 1.97 acres. You'll see through the presentation, it'll get a little bit smaller through a couple of administrative subdivisions. Looking at it from an aerial, that's the edge of the Smithfield River as field delineated by Scott Rabideau, a well-known wetlands biologist. DEM is going to put a 100-foot buffer zone from that river. There's a freshwater wetland edge that is west of that river that carries with it a 75-foot buffer, which now controls. And then in addition to that, there's also a 20-foot primary structure buffer, meaning we can't put houses within that 20 feet. And this is all under the auspice of the new regulations. You can see those buffers are a little bit different than we're normally used to seeing. And we also have the existing town's cross-country running trail. A portion of it crosses the parcel. Part of the proposal, and if you were to grant approval, Mr. Chairman, we would like to convey about 1,525 square feet of land to Lot 79, which is owned by the town. That would allow that cross-country trail to stay where it is. We're not going to be able to move it with the freshwater wetlands in such close proximity.
There's also another portion up front, that's about 8,700 square feet of land. That is going to be conveyed down to lot 53. So you'll see that ultimately that'll be the shape of the parcel. It's about now 1.73 or an acre and 3/4, about 75,000 square feet. So the proposal is a 326-foot long. This is a private roadway. It's 20 feet in paved width, 30 feet within its right-of-way. And there are the 3 proposed lots, all comporting to the R20 standard, having a minimum 20,000 square feet. When we overlay the building envelopes with the encumbrances of the freshwater wetlands, we are easily able to fit in 4-bedroom, single-family homes with 2-car garages, very similar to what's in the existing neighborhood today. So in terms of waivers, there are 4 of them. The first is, as we discussed, for a public roadway in this town, it's a 50-foot wide right-of-way. We're asking that that be reduced to 30 and relief requested of 20 feet. We're also asking for relief in terms of the paved width. As you know, Mr. Chairman, in this community, 30 feet in width is a typical town roadway. This being private, we're asking it to be 20 feet and 10 feet of relief requested. The third waiver is for the alternate cul-de-sac design. Just the way that the cul-de-sac has to be laid out with a 40-foot radius in this community, that is not going to work with our reduced roadway width. We have in the cul-de-sac a 35-foot pavement radius, and as you can see from the auto turn mapping, a fire truck is able to maneuver in and out of that area. We have had multiple TRCs with the town. Fire department has been at all the TRCs, and I don't know of any objections to the cul-de-sac. And then lastly, as you know, preliminary plan, we need to have all of our state permits in hand or ask for a waiver. We do have the freshwater wetlands permit. This hasn't been updated since we received it about 2 o'clock. And so the one element that's not here is subdivision suitability. And we would ask that that would be a stipulation of approval because if we can't get that permit from the state, we can't proceed forward. I do not see a problem getting that. As you know, subdivision suitability is just asking how, in a global fashion, the septic systems are going to work with the drainage, and it's really predicated on the more difficult permit to procure, which is the one we have, the freshwater wetlands. In terms of drainage, everything is going to go down into a double catch basin at the end of that cul-de-sac. The first line of defense is we're going to have it go into an infiltration system to treat the water quality. When that overflows, we'll have an infiltration basin, and then it's not up until the 10-year storm. Ultimately, that water will go as it goes today. There's an existing swale that takes that water to the nearby river. And in addition to that, all of the rooftops will be in their own individual UICs. Part of the drainage design is also to put a row of vegetation along that limited disturbance. Landscape architect has determined the rhododendrons and the mountain laurels would be best in that area. Sewer, obviously there's no sewer in this area of the community, so we'll be looking for individual septic systems for each one of the 3 houses. In terms of water, a little bit unique in that we have 3 individual services right up to the property line versus, say, a main that we would tap and bring down the road. In speaking with Greenville Water, we are just going to continue those services to the individual homes, so they'll all be serviced by 1-inch domestic services. And then in terms of fire hydrants, we need to be within 600 feet of a hydrant. I believe our closest hydrant is about 900 feet. One other stipulation that we would agree to, we are either going to propose to the fire department of putting a hydrant within the 600 feet, or we would have the option of doing individual sprinkler systems in each one of the homes. So just in terms of where we are, we actually received soil erosion from the town engineer back in May of 2021. This project held on a little bit longer than desired because of the change in the freshwater wetland regs. We permitted this project under the new regs as of June of last year. Our wetlands approval is now no longer pending. It has been granted. Subdivision suitability is forthcoming. Further coordination with Greenville Water, though we've been in contact with them, again, Smithfield Fire, whether we're going to sprinkle these houses or put the hydrant. Recently, before the TRC back a few weeks ago this month, and then here before you tonight as we discuss for a master and preliminary contingent upon that subdivision suitability. Lastly, we would request that you vote on delegation of that final plan to the administrative officer. Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to answer questions of you or members of the board.
Do we have any questions from the board at this time?
Yeah.
Sure, John.
You mentioned the drainage going, it can't go down that driveway to the other properties just by the topography?
Right. The way that drainage moves today, we want to keep it in that natural. It moves, north is actually down on this page, so it's moving in an easterly direction from right to left. And what we want to do, which is simple, straightforward drainage practices, capture that drainage at its low point, treat it, release it, and mimic the existing conditions as best we can. As we've discussed in the past on other projects, this is very similar, where it's not just the reduction in peak runoff rates. When we go to the state DEM, they want us to mimic existing conditions so that you don't have a huge decrease nor a huge increase. You keep that aquifer flowing as it is today.
Thank you.
Mr. Casale, did you say the new road, will it be a paved or will it be?
Yes, that'll
Pervious.
be a
Asphalt.
20-foot wide paved bituminous roadway. There will be, in terms of catchment, we want this to be a crowned roadway, bituminous berm, directing everything to that one double catch basin at the end of the cul-de-sac.
Thank you.
On lots 2 and 3, will the deeds to those properties have any kind of DEM restrictions as to what the property owners can do?
Deed restrictions, no, DEM has not, for instance, asked us or enforced any type of demarcation. If the board so desires, we will certainly agree that if there needs to be something in the deeds instructing those homeowners that they're under a wetlands permit and that they just can't clear their whole backyard.
But there's nothing in the new wetland regulations with the increased size of the setbacks that would, from the state's regulations, prohibit homeowners there from doing any kind of clearance or construction on their own?
No, not to my knowledge. As a matter of fact, this application, just because of the matrix we follow and how it goes through, these buffers were reduced. If this was, it matters, as we've discussed before, the state has divided the state DEM has divided the state of Rhode Island into the western, into that central urban area, and into the eastern portion. And because of where this proximity is, even though this riverbank is 100 feet, and you will see in some other communities that be a 200-foot, this has been reduced to a 100-foot. This is one of the few ones, Mike, that we've seen reduced. I think the state likes to tout this application because not all of them were forced under larger buffers but most of them are, but you can see some of them actually benefited from the new regulations.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Casale, just to add to his point, I think maybe what you're asking too is even on the site plan for the septic, it'll show a limit of disturbance that will be.
Yeah, it will. It will have to show that limit of disturbance on the septic plans that go in will have to mimic the limit of disturbance on the approved wetlands plan. It's normally cross-checked, but it's absolutely how we will file that application.
So that's the recommended area, not to clear past that limit of disturbance.
Yeah, it's the law. They will not be allowed to do that without a permit or without being subject to fines and penalties from the state DEM.
Does that help answer your question, Mike? Yeah. Okay, I think that's what you were asking, and it does, yes.
I think if you look at one of the plans too, that there are buffer plantings or limit of disturbance plantings.
He does show
on that edge that will
vegetative
demarcate.
buffer, yes.
Yeah. And so that is what we're proposing. That's the rhododendrons and the, right there, that purple line will be ultimately on the permit back from the state on the recorded DEM plans. That'll be the limit of disturbance that we do not have permission, frankly, to go beyond. Nor do I think.
So the green line is really the.
While the green line is the buffer zone, we're going to stay a little bit inside of that. We don't need to be outside of it, and it was part of our defense to DEM of some of the mitigative measures we've taken to get this application approved and approved so expeditiously.
Thank you. Go ahead, Ken.
No, Mr. Casale, just a couple of questions. Seeing that it's a private road, naturally, the future owners of those properties would know that they're responsible for any maintenance on that road as far as snow removal, improvements if it needs to be in the future taken care of.
Yeah, so they will be part of a homeowners association. Part of that charge will be maintaining in perpetuity the drainage. This is not going to fall upon the town. They're going to have to maintain that roadway, and that includes plowing. My guess is trash will not go down that road unless it's worked out with Public Works.
That was my
And the
next
same thing
question.
with buses in the school department.
Okay.
They more than likely will not go down that road unless worked out with the school department.
What's the approximate, I might have heard it, but just refresh my memory, the approximate length of that road to the street?
It's 326 feet, and that's measured from the center of the bulb of the cul-de-sac to the where the edge of pavement meets the roadway.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Go ahead, Charlie.
Lighting, is there going to be any lighting on that road?
No, I would, this is going to be, in terms of lighting, just wall packs on the individual houses and garages. Rural character of this neighborhood, I don't see the need for lighting. It's not a public health safety standard, and it mimics what exists out there. To my knowledge, there's not lighting within, at least within the depths of that subdivision.
If they, in the future, if they decide, that group decides that they want to put lighting in there, will they be able to put lighting in there just because?
Well,
They
normally
decide
they
to
would
put it-
ask Public Works to do that, and in this case, because it is a private road, it would probably have to be something that they would have to not only fund themselves, but agree to maintain in perpetuity.
Could they do that if they wanted?
If they were to fund it themselves and maintain it themselves, they certainly could ask for that. It's not uncommon to have lighting on a roadway,
Yeah.
but it's not necessary, especially in the rural areas of not only this town, but the state.
Well, that's what my question, the people who live around there might be upset if those street people decide to put lighting up.
Yeah, and conversely, the people that live in these houses may be upset if somebody else proposed lighting, you know. In terms of light pollution, you know, some people favor lighting because it is a health safety issue. Others are adverse to it because of the dark sky lighting and the inability to see the stars. At least today, if lighting's proposed, you know, you're under these new generation of lights, which you have these LED dark sky compliant lights, very similar to what we've shown you in past projects. So at least they are lighting the area that they're supposed to and not the entire area around it, including the dark sky.
Just looking for, if there could be an argument.
Yeah, and it can go both ways, right? Someone can move into lot one and not want to see lighting, and it could be proposed from somebody on a similar roadway.
Thank you. Mike?
One thing is brought up about trash pickup, and as part of the TRC comments, I know that Gene Allen commented that they would certainly be able to go and do pickup if, you know, the turning radius worked out and they were going to provide that to him. But it would also alleviate some of the issues that they have out there, because all the trash is brought out to the corner of Indian Run now, I guess, which is rather unsightly given the number of houses. So this would allow the opportunity to stage trash at the entrance to the road. People further up the road could bring their trash to that point. People in the cul-de-sac would obviously stack it there, and, you know, they could do pickup and reduce some of the trash barrels that are out on Indian Run.
Yeah, there's probably another 4 or 5 houses past this roadway.
And we would certainly agree to further those discussions with the Public Works Director. I know that trash is not normally picked up on a private road, but there are exceptions, and this seems to fit that need.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Casali.
Briefly expanding on that, the applicants have been in communication with several of the abutters and made some commitments, including doing some upgrades and installing pavement up to this private road. So from Indian Run up there to where this new cul-de-sac will start, installing pavement. So there's been discussions and working to mitigate the impacts that this development will have on the area.
So it's up to the end of,
Up to,
that side.
yeah, exactly, to the far side of the cul-de-sac. So the 3 or 4 houses that Mike mentioned will still have a gravel road for the remainder, but again.
Would Mr. Ringland be opposed to pricing out, completing the road at whoever's cost, the balance of those houses' cost?
Yeah, come on up. There will be.
Just, yeah, there will be public comment. I'm just asking, you can mention your name.
Speak during public comment, but my partner and I agreed to pave 12 feet wide. The fire department requested possibly 15 feet wide, which I went and measured yesterday. There are, most of the area between the beginning of Indian Run and that road is about 15 feet wide. And I think the fire department would like to see that. So we agreed to pave that going in there, as well as possibility of working out with them, helping them get water down to the end of the road, which I'm sure they can bring up when they have the opportunity to speak. And then I had left it with them that when we're done doing that work at the end of the cul-de-sac and to their houses, that we would grade and gravel out the road. I wasn't going to pave that.
I'm not asking you at your cost. I'm saying if they were willing to
No,
pay.
I actually mentioned to one of them, it's a great idea why my guys are all there paving to talk to them, because I'm sure they'll get a much better price.
Right.
We'll have the road graded, so.
That's why I'm asking you.
Cost opportunity for them to save some money and do it. We just didn't want it part of this project because we have to keep it where we're not affecting any drainage. I don't want to get into, causing any drainage issues. And then, right now we have to basically grade what's there, pave it. Where the water goes, it goes. And then hopefully we'll work with them to make it better for them at the end of the road.
Thank you.
From the applicant's point of view on this, is there any other questions? We don't have anything to further to present. Of course, we would like an ability to respond to any comments.
Absolutely. Thank you.
the engineer is available to answer any technical questions that any neighbors might have.
Thank you very much. Any more questions from the board? Hearing none at this time, we'll open up the public hearing, 8:46 PM. If you'd like to come up and speak, please come up to the microphone, speak clearly, state your name and address, please. Again, anyone from the public who would like to speak about this project? Hearing none. Public hearing is closed at 8:46. Does the board have any conversation, questions, comments regarding this project?
No, just conversation about the waivers, maybe? We would go down the list of them, just, we can do that.
Sure. Yeah, sure.
Oh, okay. Mr. Chairman, let me just see that, because the public hearing is closed, so let me just take care of it. Mr. Chairman, I understand the applicant has agreed to undertake other things that I want to put on the record, and if I misstate anything, Mr. Goodyear can certainly correct me. The agreements are as follows. The abutters will pay Greenville Water to bring a 2-inch line into the edge of town right away, a meter pit to be installed for 3 properties. Trimar will cover all labor costs associated with bringing the individual lines down Blue Feather Trail, work to stop at individual lot lines within the right-of-way. Abutters will provide and pay materials. Trimar agrees to regrade the right-of-way after all work is complete. No paving at this time beyond the entrance to the new proposed road. Trimar has agreed to work with the town and fire department on acceptable width of pavement from Indian Run Trail to the entrance of new road. Road now as seen impervious anyway. Land on the corner as identified in the plans transferred to Shaw's at no cost to them. And Trimar will help execute a homeowners association to maintain the road from Indian Run Trail into the subdivision. Will include the Shaws and 3 new proposed houses therein. Have I got that correct?
That's correct, and that's a little bit more in detail than the points that we've heard tonight. Scott's testimony, the homeowners association, working with the fire department, bringing water up to some people who don't have water. So that's why that was prepared. It's been shared with Mike Phillips, and some of the others I know are here, so it's important that we get that on the record.
It is a document, Mr. Chairman, so I'll mark it as applicant's Exhibit 1 for purposes of this evening's discussion.
And just to clarify, is it that you're going to try and do Blue Feather Trail and the cul-de-sac, the road with the cul-de-sac in one HOA? You're going to try and work it out that way with the neighbors, or are they going to be 2 set?
I wasn't following your question.
So it said that work with the butters to form an HOA, I believe it said?
Right, there'll be an HOA for these 3 houses in, concerning the maintenance of the stormwater facility. And I believe the intention is from Indian Run in where the pavement will be.
Okay.
There'll be an HOA, and if there's an agreement that the pavement's going to extend further, there'll be more people that need to join the HOA.
Okay, I wasn't sure if it was inclusive of the houses past, I don't know the name of the road, but whatever road it is, okay.
Yeah. It would be best, I'm sure
Okay.
the town's council might recommend that the people talk about it at least. It's always better.
Well, I mean, I would recommend that they work. It'd be in the best interest of everybody if it was all one, I think, but. Correct.
Doesn't make sense for what we're disturbing and really modifying to have one HOA. You know, the other players in there, they were a little bit smaller. The reason I didn't say that include them is their cost of an HOA to maintain our cul-de-sac. Yeah, but I would encourage them to have something to carry on from the new road that we're in, just to maintain the water lines that they're gonna put in, between the water is gonna maintain them. Then they'll have a gravel road that they may want to pave. So even if the two HOAs work together, however they want to do it. The only thing they're really hiring is snow.
Snow. And maintaining the water if there's an issue.
Common enemy, I heard that.
So with that, Mr. Chairman, I believe the question that was pending is a discussion of the waivers and what are they, to be precise. So just to remind the board, the waivers are a request for pavement width, for the right-of-way width, which is the larger section of the road, putting aside pavement or not, and the cul-de-sac design. So the board wants to have a discussion about those.
What's the waiver requested with the cul-de-sac design?
50 feet to 40.
That's a 50 or 40.
But it sounds like the fire department's been involved at every TRC the whole step of the way, and they've
So-
agreed to it.
That figure is actually taken from your subdivision regulations. That's the prescribed figure for a cul-de-sac design in the town. So if we deviate that, technically you have to request a waiver. And again, we've provided the truck turning analysis documents the functionality of what we've proposed.
Nobody has any questions and not looking for a site visit, then I think at this time, we're looking for a motion
Mr.
to
Chairman,
approve with waivers. The only thing I would leave till, don't include it, is the decision for signature by chair. Leave that as a separate vote, if we could.
decision for what?
For administrative, are they asking for administrative? Yes. So can we leave that as a separate vote? Yes. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, the motion to approve the master and preliminary plan of Blue Feather Trail, AP 12, Lot 54. The approval will be based upon the evidence presented to the planning board, including the testimony of the engineer, the applicant, and other evidence provided, including applicant Exhibit 1 marked tonight. The approval also is based upon the findings of the town planner in the memorandum dated May 11th, 2023, Michael Phillips, which we'd like to have marked as Planning Board Exhibit 1. The approval will also be based upon the findings of fact presented to the Planning Board as Town Planning Board Exhibit B. The approval will be based upon 3 waivers. The waivers include the waiver requesting a change in roadway width from the required 30-foot to 20-foot. The waiver for the required right-of-way width of 30 feet from the required 50 feet, as well as the cul-de-sac waiver width, which was discussed moments ago. The approval will also be based upon the following conditions. That 1, the administrative subdivision be prepared to document the lot line amendments with adjoining town lot and the owner, Plat 12, Lot 53. 2, that all required utility and state permits be submitted at final plan approval. And 3, that the site suitability determination take place and is reviewed.
motion and a second. Do we have any more discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. We have one more vote, and that is whether to have final plan approval be handled administratively.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that the final approval be brought to the planning board and not be done administratively.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion on that? You can ask.
Ken, is there a reason?
I just think that we should be included in the final process of most of the projects. We've done it in the past, and I feel that this should not be any different. I'm not saying that administratively that we're going to be missing anything, but I just feel that to cover all the bases for us as a planning board, that we should have a hand in the final approval.
Certainly seen that occur when there was anticipation that there would be changes. There's no changes. I defer to the board on understanding that prolongs agendas sometimes unnecessarily. If there are no changes, it's sounds like you guys have a pretty long docket.
Okay.
If there was something critical or controversial about it, I could see that, but I'm not, nothing's jumping out at me that could possibly change the board's thinking. And
Myself also, I feel the same way.
What's that?
I feel the same way as Mike. I don't
So we'll do a roll vote.
Okay.
Mike? No. Joe?
Yes.
Al?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
I'm a no.
Yes.
Ken?
We'll say no, we got enough to do.
Rick? Joe? So it's 5 no's, 4 yeses, so it'll be done administratively. Thank you, guys. I think that we can all agree with what's happening.
It's almost 10 o'clock.
Right?
Within the Red Sox.
No, we got one more. It's gonna be quick.
All right, without further ado, number 3, West River Estates, public hearing, comprehensive permit application, major land development project, request for reinstatement of preliminary plan, AP 24, lot 108, 15 Whipple Road, 3.77 acres approximately, 16 lots, zone R20, applicant owner Luke Calcagni III, Lime Rock Development LLC, attorney Michael D. Resnick, Esquire, and KSP Law.
Mr. Chairman, with your permission, we don't do this a whole heck of a lot, so I thought it'd be useful that I stand up and give you the standard. Just want to remind the board, we're not here to redecide this project. We're here to follow the elements of what a reinstatement of an application means. So Article M from your subdivision regulations sets those standards, and here they are. When an applicant has exceeded a deadline established by these regulations for submission of materials for a subdivision or land development, thereby rendering a previous granted approval invalid, the application may be reinstated by the planning board under the following conditions. 1, the subdivision or land development project is consistent with the comprehensive community plan. 2, The land development and subdivision review regulations are substantially the same as they were at the time of the original approval. 3, the zoning of the development parcel is substantially the same as it was at the time of the original approval. And 4, physical conditions on the development parcel are substantially the same as they were at the time of the original approval. So those are the standards we're here to address this evening. And with that, I'll yield to Mr. Resnick so he can make his demonstration of evidence.
Mr. Chairman, before we start, I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to make a motion that we continue this project, West River Estates, pending the cleanup of the property, because this property has been sitting far too long. It's an eyesore. I drive down Whipple Road, and I'm sure that all these neighbors here have some concern about that, and I feel that this property should be cleaned up before they start and come to us for reapproval for the project, because the property shouldn't have been left like that. I'm sorry, and that's where I am with this.
I second. Mr. Chairman, may I respond?
There's a motion on the floor, so unfortunately, I don't believe you can. We have a motion and a second, but there can definitely be discussion amongst the board. And we can also speak to our counsel.
Yeah, if I can, Mr. Chairman, it really is a question at this point of dealing with what's before you as an application, and that is an application for reinstatement. Those are the elements you're required to address. You would be well within your rights to have a discussion about that, cleaning up the property in the context of dealing with the reinstatement.
As a stipulation.
As a stipulation. But typically, grounds for continuance are things like you don't have enough information to decide something. It's really due process and fundamental fairness. So really continuing a project based upon something like the property needs to be cleaned up isn't typically appropriate.
I will just make a comment on this real quick. I would say that even doing it on that basis, that doesn't really give the applicant any urge to do it necessarily. If we make it a stipulation of something that they have to do in order to obtain building permits or to continue this project, then it's something that's more likely to be done. And I'm not saying the applicant would do this, but if they got denied tonight, they may let it sit for another 5 years. And then that does not help the neighbors at all. So I think what we need to do is move forward with this and make it a stipulation that they clean up the project as part of the approval if they get it tonight. I would ask that Mr. Arbona bring back his motion and we make it a stipulation based on potential approval.
I agree with Kenny. I don't see any, why would they, if we agreed, just let it do it? I mean, it's already been agreed that they would do it in the first place, so do it again, blah, blah, blah. Why can't just, for good faith, wait 30 days and come back? What's the problem?
What I think the solicitor is indicating that we don't have the authority to do that, and we run the risk of violating due process and other rights of the applicant by doing that because it's not before us.
I think that's what you would.
That's really the point,
order.
Mr. Dambra.
So the way of getting the same means is what Al mentioned, is conditioning our granting, if we do so today, on Kenny's concerns with the property. That way, everybody is satisfied.
And
we don't run the risk of an adverse litigation because of an improper move by this board.
Yeah, and just to further that thought process, you can certainly discuss with the applicant a time frame for getting the property cleaned up and build it in as a condition to your approval this evening, if that's what you want to do.
I'll rescind my motion and save it for putting it into as a condition.
Thank you, Mr. Arbona.
Thank you, Ken.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
And just to start off, apropos to your comments, Mr. Orabana, we are certainly amenable to a stipulation to the extent that this board deems it suitable to reinstate us, to clean up the property and to move forward in an expeditious manner. So let me just say right up front, we agree to that.
Thank you.
So based on what Solicitor Levesque said, I won't go ad nauseum over the elements, but very briefly.
I'm sorry, can you just identify yourself once more? I'm sorry, I
Absolutely.
apologize.
Michael Resnick, on behalf of the applicant and owner, West River Estates, Plat 24, Lot 108, 15 Whipple Road.
Thank you.
And this is a reinstatement relative to a comprehensive permit project. Property is located in an R zone. Just by way of brief background, I know that members of the board are familiar with this. Master plan was approved for this project 5/6/19, May 2019. Preliminary plan was approved on 5/25/21, and there was an administrative final that was provided on June 18th, 2021. I want to make it clear to the board that the reason we are before you requesting this reinstatement is based on a staff's position, Mr. Levesque's position, as well as your planner's position, that construction activities did not commence within the statutory one-year period as outlined in the Comprehensive Permit Act. So reinstatement is pursuant to the Rhode Island general laws. There's an enabling statute that provides and requires municipalities to enact a reinstatement ordinance. It is not very specific as to the requirements of the ordinance, and your ordinance is contained in Article M, and I believe that's page 3132 of your regulations. And I will not repeat the four elements, but I will say this. We have presented to the board this evening a brief expert report from Bob Ruley, who's the former planner of the town of Warren. He's the present planner of the town of Bridgewater in Massachusetts. It was my expectation that Mr. Ruley would be here tonight. Unfortunately, he had to go to a conservation meeting up in Massachusetts, and that's why he's not here. But I will say that if you look at that report, based on his analysis of your comprehensive plan, your rules and regulations, state law, as well as your local ordinance, he found that all of those factors have been met. I would also suggest that we received a very favorable staff report from your planner that also echoed that those four elements had been met. Now, normally as an attorney,
Can I interrupt you for 1 second? I just want to make you aware that that cannot be considered an expert report. So we can take it under consideration, but we can't use it as an expert witness since he's not here.
I would respectfully disagree with that. I have submitted written reports by way of experts in many occasions, many boards, and I've never dealt with that issue.
I know what you're thinking of, Mr. Chairman. We've had a problem before where somebody wanted to cross-examine a witness and only a report existed, so.
Correct, that's what I'm saying.
This is a different situation. So you're certainly able to accept the report as long as it's been authenticated and, you know, he's an officer of the court. He's representing that the expert drafted this report, signed it. And as long as it has that indicia of reliability, you are certainly able to take it for expert evidence. Assuming no one stands up this evening and says they want to cross-examine the witness. If that becomes a problem, then two things have to happen. Either you have to disregard the report, or you have to reschedule this hearing so that the witness can be present and subject to cross.
Like, I guess what I was saying is I can't take his word for it. The report, yes, is legitimate, but you saying it doesn't make it the expert part of it.
Understood.
Thank you.
So, but if
So who's assuming the liability that this guy's an expert?
I am. Bar number 9028. I will tell you that my credibility as to the fact that Mr. Ruley is an accredited planner, you have his resume, you have his report, and I would suggest you, while we put that together, to demonstrate from a planner that those elements have been met. Your own planner, Mr. Phillips, made the same determinations in his review of the elements. Now, normally, as an attorney, I would not speak to the elements of a for instance, if we're master plan, preliminary plan, I would not provide testimony. I will tell you that I have reviewed your land use regulations. I have reviewed your zoning ordinance. I have reviewed your comprehensive plan, and I have been on site on the property. And I can tell you that based on my review of what was in place at the time of the approvals, and as compared to what is in place now, all those elements are met. And I just offer that testimony based on my legal opinion in reviewing those elements to the extent that the board would consider it.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. And just a couple other things that I would like to add. So the operative term here is commencing construction activities. The Rhode Island Comp Permit Act does not define what construction activities are. The Land Use Development Act does not define what construction activities are. Zoning does not define what construction activities are. I say this not to be adversarial, but I just want to explain to you some of the genesis of this. We did provide correspondence to staff as well as the board. They did in fact outline construction activities that we believe meet that categorization. And they are on a chart. They occurred from June 2021 to June 2022. And I can tell you it's approximately $65,000 that was done in site clearing, in other earthwork, in tree cutting, and also bringing utilities, getting permits, paying the expense to rip up roads to bring utilities to the property edge. I am not submitting that any of that utility work was actually done on the property. I have a great deal of respect for Mr. Levesque and Mr. Phillips, but I will tell you, I have had this issue in many municipalities, and what these gentlemen did, in my opinion, constitutes construction activity within a year. They did substantial activity. There is no case law on this. If there was a case, I would bring it to you, and in my opinion, because there is a dearth of case law, that is why we're here. Now, that said, our path is amiable, asking this board to reinstate. We're not trying to litigate that issue. We're not trying to get a case of novel impression. That's not what we want to do. We want to move forward with this project, and we want to develop it as expeditiously as possible. But I do think it's important for the board to know and the community to know, this is not a gentleman that got these approvals and didn't spend $1. He spent 65 grand during that period. And I would also remind the board, and I'm sure we're all sick and tired of it, we don't even want to hear about it anymore. This was during the epoch of the pandemic. These approvals were obtained in 2019, 2021, as far as preliminary and final. Pandemic was declared March 20th. So those couple of years, I think we all know, business in general was a little bit different. I can tell you that this applicant is ready to roll on this project and to move it forward. And so, again, we are here to do this what we believe to be the right way, to be a partner with the community and with this board, and request this reinstatement. I'd remind this board that this is a comprehensive permit project. Jurisdiction is with the State Housing Appeals Board. And this town, as well as the state of Rhode Island, needs housing. They need low and moderate housing. And this is a 16-unit development with 4 that are delineated as LMI. And I think it's a good project. It was a good project when it was before you before. It received favorable votes. In fact, there was at the preliminary, there was 2 abstentions, but other than that, it was a unanimous vote. There was no negative votes.
There was one against it.
I thought that there's.
Oh, yeah, there was an exempt, yeah.
And
Yeah, I read it.
the point was it was approved, and you're more familiar with that testimony
Well, you
than
did
me.
say they would take 3 years to do this, so it did say it wasn't gonna be speedy, but.
Yeah.
Like I said, I did a lot of running into, I think you're a very smart man, and I looked up a lot on your stuff and everything. I think it's just the tax, people just want it cleaned up.
And I want to tell you that I don't want to create an adversarial situation, but I will tell you that a stop work order was issued on this property. So one of the reasons why it hasn't been cleaned up or work isn't going on is that when the permits went to be pulled, there was a stop work order because there was a determination that the project had expired. So This gentleman wants to clean up the property, wants to move forward with that. I will tell you, Mr. Cagney can come up here and provide testimony under oath. He's had outreach with community members. He's had meetings with the abutting condominium association and condominium owners. I don't want to suggest that there's no opposition to this, but I understand that it has been some favorable meetings. I know that there was some complaints from a couple of the abutters or community members with respect to rodents or some type of infestation. Mr. Calcagni paid to have budget come out. A full report was provided to Ms. Phillips. Mr. Phillips, my understanding is that the genesis of that issue was not from the property, but we still did everything that we could to ensure that rats or the like were not coming from the property. And the one thing that I will say, and I say this because I think that it's important that people that are here understand that. The world has changed. When this project was before this board at that time, doing a 16-unit development with 4 units, that type of density was appropriate. I will tell you, and I'm not saying this other than to be factual. If this project is not reinstated, if Mr. Calcagni has to start from the beginning, because of the expense, because the world has changed, the project that will come back will be a comp permit project. It will be of a higher density. And I have spoken to Mr. Rulli, I've spoken to other planners that I work with, and the reality is that they will be able to support that request. Now, we don't want to do that, but I'm not saying that to this board to try to bludgeon a reinstatement. What I'm saying to the community is this is a good project, and the reality is whether it's Mr. Calcagni or somebody else, if this project doesn't get built, somebody's going to buy this property. If it's not Mr. Calcagni, and they're going to go for more density, and they're going to get it, because not only will they get it right now, but the Rhode Island Comp Permit Act is changing right now as we speak, and it is going to be even more developer friendly than it is now. So I would request that the board please grant this reinstatement based on the memo provided by your planner, based off my review, based off of the materials of Mr. Rulli. I can tell you that me and Mr. Calcagni are happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Resnick, and possibly Mr. Calcagni can answer this question also. Believe me, I don't have a problem with this development. It's good. It's better this way at 16 than it is at 32, because 32 is going to be way too tight in that piece of land. If we approve tonight to reinstate, when do you estimate that the first shovel goes into the ground?
Mr. Calcagni?
Please just state your name for the record.
Louis Calcagni.
Zoning.
So with reapproval of this project, we'd start to break ground within 90 days. So a lot of the work that has already been done with soil erosion permits, DEM notifications, clearing, grubbing, all that stuff has taken place. There was a renter in the home, which did cause a mess. He's no longer there. The yard has been cleaned up, the grass has been cut, all the other stuff has been taken out of there. There was construction trailers there at one point for job site construction trailers. That came off another project. I spoke to zoning, and they wanted them removed. I had them removed within a week. So the pest inspection was done. We've met with neighbors, walked through the process. I have every intent to get going.
What's the plan for is the house coming down, or is that staying there?
It could stay, or it could come down as part of the plan. The first duplex unit on the map is basically right in that same footprint.
So in approximation to where that house is, what side is the entrance to that?
It's the entrance to this development is exactly almost where the driveway is now.
Okay.
So when you're looking at the house, to the left side.
To the left of the house?
Yeah.
Go ahead, John.
So that do you have like a legal response to the definition of construction taking place? And
Commencement.
like a response then?
Sure. So the short answer is, Mr. Resnick is right, that there isn't any real precedence to define what construction on site means. It's difficult. You can search in other jurisdictions and there's some help. Suffice it to say that based upon my research, what was done here was not enough. You have to do something on site that is construction, building something, a road or a portion of it, or the utilities or a portion of it, or a building or a portion of it, something that meets the common sense definition of construction. And that doesn't mean land clearing. That's not construction. That's taking things away. That's preparing the site. So that's the best answer I can give you. There's not a whole heck of a lot of guidance out there. Thankfully, we have an applicant who understands the lay of the land and is here to do a reinstatement and agrees with the town that that's what's required.
Thank you.
So the issue of whether there was construction, not construction, is a non-issue because
It's irrelevant.
what's before us is a motion for a reinstatement, so.
Correct. Yeah, and the only thing that matters is, did he meet the elements?
Out of an abundance of caution, he's agreed to file despite his position, to file the motion for reinstatement.
Exactly right.
If I just may briefly, Mr. Chairman, my point in referencing that was to only give this board background. It was not my concept to get into an academic exercise with Mr. Levesque. He's a skilled litigator. I have no interest in entertaining that. It was really just to give you the genesis. There was an outlay here. And so I only suggest that while the reinstatement factors are those four, I always do think that there is a certain equitable component, and there was money outlaid here. This was not a project that was forgotten about. And again, based on this and based on Mr. Calcagni's representations before this board, I would request it be reinstated. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions or comments from the board at this time?
Chairman,
Yes, sir.
motion.
We can't, we still have to have a public hearing.
I'm sorry. Well,
That's okay. You can make one afterwards if you like.
I have a question about that.
Okay, go ahead.
The application here is not for anything other than reinstatement of a prior project.
Correct.
I know what you're saying, we need a public hearing, but these are elements that in fact have been reviewed by the planner. Okay, and he's made a recommendation that all of the requirements of reinstatement have been met. And to do a public hearing at this point in time, I think would be, as the argument was made before, it would be moot.
I think it's procedure at this point.
That's precisely right, Mr. Chairman. The state law is pretty clear. You reinstate at preliminary plan level, which means you need to have a public hearing because that's what's required at preliminary plan. Right.
I just would add that we immediately acquiesced to that concept because it was noticed to the community, and Mr. Calcagni reached out to, I would say, almost everybody that wasn't a butter or within a radius, personally.
Well, then at this time, I will open the public hearing at 9:24 PM.
Ed DeMayo, 75 Whipple Road. Ed DeMayo, 75 Whipple Road. Now, I don't know a whole heck of a lot, but I'm looking at Blue Feather Trail, R20, and on 2 acres, you're putting 3 houses. Now, I'm looking at West River Estates, R20, and they want 16 lots. Now, the Cardinal Run was proposed at 22. It went down to 11. They didn't get full approval of all those units. So on, say, 4 acres, you want to put 16 R20, from what I read on Buffett, is single-family houses, or are they duplexes? Are they low income? I'm not in favor of low income. I live on the street, and they did get reduced at Cardinal Run. I don't mind houses because the last one was beautiful. I listened to all the terminology and rhetoric, beautiful the way it was put out, presented. I just like to see this cut in half from 16.8, like it was at Cardinal Hill with the gated community. There's no scare tactic that, well, if we don't get 16, we're gonna get 32. I don't believe that. I believe it can get reinstated. We can do something about that. I'd like to see this go lower with units if they're gonna be low income. But then R20 says, maybe I don't know enough, single family. So I don't know, is it gonna be single family on 4 acres of land? You're gonna put 20 houses? I don't know how that goes. I mean, I'm just opposed to too much condensed area. We got enough, we want to keep Smithfield rural. I want to keep it single family as much as possible. That's what I feel. I'm on that street. I love Smithfield. I love the town. And I don't want to see it turned into a circus, to say the least. As it is, Whipple, late at night, you hear boom boxes now coming from wherever they're coming. I don't know if I'm making total, making myself clear. Maybe I'm not, but I just like to see it reduced. There have been things reduced, and I don't believe they'll go up. I don't think they have the right to make it go up from here. But on 4 acres, you want to put 16 units? I don't think so. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Samantha Walters. I live at 11 Whipple Road, which is directly next to the property line. I've talked with Mr. Calcagni many times. He's been very helpful, so I just want to state that immediately. We just had a few concerns with the construction beginning so soon, primarily because in the initial, we weren't the owners of the property when this was preliminarily proposed. So our concerns revolve around the hours and days of construction. That could just be our ignorance, primarily because we have had instances of people on our property in the backyard, as well as our driveway being blocked with the delivery of heavy machinery, which resulted in one of the residents being late for work. So we just want to make sure that that's not going to be an ongoing issue that we have to worry about once construction begins. And then the other concern we had, which, like I said, we've talked with Mr. Calcagni about, and he was very helpful with, is the driveway. And if you look at the plans, you could see half of our driveway is on the other property, which we weren't aware of before we bought the house. He helped us in rezoning it. However, re-examining the plans, we just want to make sure that there is no issue after installation where we would need a potential easement, where if the property were sold, we would have a continuing issue with our driveway not being our own.
Mr. Calcagni, can you please address the driveway situation?
So the existing driveway on their property was on to my property on 15 Whipple, and identified that early on. So when they bought the property, I offered at my expense to mark out the property line, put in the soil erosion, retaining basins there, and regrade and pave, and gave them a brand new driveway. So.
And that was done?
That's done, yeah.
Okay.
So that was all done, and the property line is at the edge of their driveway. So the closest utility that would be towards their property is probably at least, I want to say, 15 feet off there. So there shouldn't be any disturbance to that area. And it's in terms of working hours, it's the typical, town bylaws working hours.
Whatever the town.
Yeah.
I would just add, obviously, Mr. Calcagni's been in communication with you, and I'm sure he'll have no problem with his project manager providing contact information if there's any kind of issue during construction, phone call, email, and rectify it.
Thank you.
Good evening, gentlemen. Bill Robinson, my wife, Alicia Robinson, 37 Fenwood Ave. Our issue isn't so much with the project itself as it is with Mr. Calcagni. Our neighbor, 39 Fenwood Ave, granted him a easement for the rain runoff. In preparing the land for that easement, he knowingly falsified the property lines, came onto our property while we were not around, and damaged our lawn and sprinkler system for current quoted $2,800 plus the cost of reestablishing our privacy wall. In an attempt to make ourselves whole and resolve this loss, we put in a claim with his insurance company to find out that he, at the time of the loss, wasn't insured. And ultimately, it has resulted in our loss not even being covered. So I just thought that this would be a good time to bring this all to light.
Absolutely.
First of all, I have email communications that were actually, I think, facilitated by your town engineer. And I have a packet of them right there, where my client offered, and I'm saying this by way of a settlement discussion, because I just heard about potential litigation. He offered to remediate the issue, and he didn't hear anything back. So that's the first thing. The second thing is he has a valid contractor's license. He has valid insurance. They looked up the wrong company. They called the wrong insurance company. And he decides whether he submits something to his insurance, not them. The third thing is that this is a private dispute. It's a civil dispute. And I would be happy to try to resolve it amicably with these community members, but respectfully, this is not the forum. And I will provide my information to them immediately upon this meeting, and we can have a phone call tomorrow, and we can see if we can resolve this amicably. But to bring a civil dispute to this board is inappropriate. And the second thing is, this gentleman, with due respect, is not a licensed surveyor. I confirmed with a licensed surveyor this morning, there was no trespass or incursion on their property whatsoever. And he's not competent to say that there was, because he's not a surveyor registered in the state of Rhode Island. So I'm more than willing to resolve this, but it's going to go through me.
Thank you. I would agree that this is a civil issue. It's not something we can handle or anything we can do anything about, but I appreciate the fact that you spoke today. Is there anyone else from the public who would like to speak? I'll ask once more. Is there anyone from the public who would like to speak?
Good evening. My name is Charles Boudreau, and I live in Pheasant Ridge. Now, I look out my window when I'm eating dinner, and all I see is a bunch of stumps hanging up, rocks all over the place. I mean, I can't even look out my windows. I don't want to see anything more than what he was planning on doing. I beg this board to please reinstate this permit so I can look at houses that are there, not a bunch of junk. That's all I'm asking. Is that fair? Mr. Calgagni, I don't even know. This is the first time I've met him. He's met, I'm on the board. I wasn't there the night he met with us. He's been very gracious to us, and I think he should be reinstated. That is my judgment.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else who would like to speak? Hearing none, we'll close the public hearing at 9:35 p.m. At this time, we will be looking for a motion from the board.
For the motion, should we discussion regarding Kenny's request for
We
stipulation?
can.
We can add it to it. I'll add it to it. I'm gonna make the motion and add in the stipulations to the cleanup of the property, if that's okay.
Yep, that's fine.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make, Mr. Levy? You okay? You sure?
Stretching. You're stretching.
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to make a motion that we approve the reinstatement of the West River Estates on 15 Whipple Road with the 4 stipulations. The subdivision or land development project is consistent with the comprehensive community plan. The project is consistent with comprehensive plan as the project was approved using the density provisions as those adopted in 2021 housing amendment. 5 units, AC for projects with a minimum of 25% LMI component. Number 2, the land development and subdivision review regulations are substantially the same as they were at the time of the original approval. There have been no changes in the land development and subdivision review regulations since the approval of the project in 2021. Number 3, the zoning of the development parcel is substantially the same as it was at the time of original approval. Zoning of the development parcel is substantially the same as it was at the time of the original approval. And number 4, physical conditions on the development parcel are substantially the same, the same they were at the time of original approval. As noted, there was a land clearing operation and some minor grading associated with the land clearing operation in September 2021. In preparation for the project, and water and sewer lines were brought into the property in the summer of 2022. Other than these changes which were done in preparation for commencement of construction, the site remains in its final approval. Recommendation. Okay. Recommendation motion that based on the project's compliance with the conditions for reinstatement as detailed above, the planning department is of the opinion that the preliminary plan approval for the above mentioned comprehensive permit and major land development project be reinstated, and that the final approval be handled by administratively. In addition to that, I would like to add that Mr. Calcagni be given a 30-day 30 days to clean the property up to within the standards that the stumps, the rocks, what have you, be removed as he is. Planning not to put the first shovel in the ground in 90 days, which I would also state that doing that pending any permits that will be issued at that time.
We have a motion. A motion and a second. Do we have any discussion from the board? Sorry, we have a motion and a second. So I heard Mr. Calcagni say 90 days. I don't know if he feels as though he can get it done in 30 days, and even at that, what's the penalty if he doesn't?
Are we in discussion mode?
We're in discussion, yes. We have a motion and a second, so.
So I'm not really clear on this 90-day thing. When a project is reinstated, it goes to the normal time period that's allowed for a preliminary plan to a final plan and so on and so on. I understand the stipulation that was going to be put on this approval that the property be cleaned up as far as removing debris, rocks, stumps, whatever. But to commence construction within 90 days.
It might not be, the decision might not be prepared
Yeah,
within 30 days.
I don't even think, I'm not sure that's appropriate to this. I agree. I was just.
Because there's still a stop work order on there until final approval is granted, and it's re-recorded, I guess, right?
Yeah, I mean, so the issue is giving him a fair opportunity to clean the property, number one. Number two, The answer to your question, Mr. Chairman, is if he doesn't comply with the condition, then he's technically in violation of your approval and could be brought back before this board and could also be violated by the town. So I wouldn't want to put the applicant in a position to fail. I'm hearing that 30 days is not going to be adequate. It is a pretty large, substantial amount of work that needs to be done. You could consider making the condition that he clean up the property a condition that he has to meet before getting final approval. That would mean that he has to do that before he has the opportunity to record the final plan and actually get permits. That's the most important thing for a builder, getting permits to do houses.
Does he have the ability to commence work without final approval?
Of course. Yeah, of course. You can do site
Just
work
clean
without final approval. Yeah, of course. Yeah, so that's one option that the board may consider.
So there's a clock again, basically.
A clock that's really, he's not able to move forward with the project and make money without cleaning the site, and that's
He has
the
to spend
stick.
more money at this point
Yeah.
to get
that's
the final
stick.
approval.
So that would be one option. The other is to build in a sufficient amount of time, which isn't going to be 30 days. But that's tricky because, like I said, if he violates that time frame, then you have to bring him back here, more time passes. So you probably, at the same amount of time it would take him to finish and get the final. But it's up to you.
Condition prior to construction, anytime up to the beginning of that
Yeah.
90-day period.
That's precisely what you're doing in effect when you say conditional on final plan approval is you have the site cleaned up. Because he doesn't get to put foundations in, build houses without final plan recorded with the town. Right.
The only problem I have with that is the property's been sitting like that since they started cutting trees down, bringing in the utilities. Regardless of what the tenant was doing there, he's the landlord. He should have enforced it a long time ago, rather than let it sit and fester and affect everybody else, like that gentleman in the back looking out his window and seeing rocks and stumps. So I'll amend it and give him 60 days, but I have a problem with it. I really do. It needs to be taken care of. I drive that road and I curse that property every single time I drive down that road. And I feel for every one of these people in here that live around, that have had to look at that property in the condition that it's in since he put the first shovel in the ground to take down the trees and bring in the utilities. It's been left that way since 2021.
Yep.
It's time to.
Mr. Urbano, I'm not debating that issue with you. You have two options. You can build a time frame into this, or you can do it conditional on final plan.
I'll change the motion to 60 days, but I'm gonna stick with it.
Ken, would you go to 90?
60 is reasonable. It comes close enough to what Scott's arguing.
But I mean, based on that, the final stops him. I mean, I don't think that's, I think that's the fairest and
Does the applicant have any thoughts on a time frame that he'd be amenable to?
If I could just voice my concern very briefly.
Go ahead.
Mr. Calcagney's ready to start cleaning up this property tomorrow, next week. It's not that. Trash, debris, things like that. It's gonna happen next week. We'll start. We can make that as a condition. My concern is that there's something out there that he's not expecting as far as some of the items that you've referenced. You're more familiar with the property than me, Mr. Urbano, the stumps, the like. I just don't know what might be encountered. And I don't want to put the gentleman in a situation where he's been violated because practically it just took more time to get it done. What I'm talking about is, could there be a way to tether this condition to due diligence, like continued effort relative to these items? Because again, we all know, I mean, you experience things on sites that just.
So I guess my question to that, Scott, would be if we put a stipulation of 60 or 90 days on it, and within 45 days, they find something there that they have to go to DEM for or remediate, can they come back before the board to extend the time frame?
They can come back and ask you to amend your decision. Yes.
So that really answers what you're asking. If there was an issue, they could.
Yes, and it's the board's determination. What I would request is that Mr. Calcagni will agree to start work next week as far as cleaning up material, trash, all that type of stuff, and we would ask for a 90-day period so that it's more realistic about the other items. But I'm talking about continued efforts, not a couple days out there and then we've got like a 2-month break. Continued efforts.
That's what I want to see.
Would you be okay with amending it to 90 days?
I'll amend it, I'll give you the amendment to 90 days, but I need to see progress on a daily basis that property is being cleaned up and to satisfactory where it doesn't look like a bomb.
And if it pleases the board, I'll communicate with your planner regularly to make sure that we're happy. Yes.
I will tell you that I drive that road frequently, and if I don't see a lot of changes, he's gonna wish that it's my telephone.
And then,
I don't think there's anyone behind you, Scott.
It's okay. I have big shoulders.
I hear him say picking up trash, so in other words, we're not talking about the rocks and the stumps.
I can probably answer this question, Charlie. So the rocks and stuff that are on the site, some material does have to stay. It does have to be stockpiled because there are piles that may balance the site. There may be rock walls that are going to be built. So it will be neatened up as far as material on site, but all the trash, garbage, any metal, anything like that will be taken off site. Anything that's on site will be cleaned up and basically put in order so you know that that's material for the site.
We don't have to get into specifications, I'm just, and honestly, just say honestly, I'm gonna try and I'm gonna do it, that's all I want.
I don't expect you to move the rocks because like the chairman has said, you're probably gonna end up using some of that stuff on the property. Stockpile stumps someplace. instead of leaving,
Those are gonna get trucked out.
something like that there. I don't have a problem with that. I don't expect you to spend tens of thousands of dollars to take everything off in the next 90 days. I just want to see some progress because I want to see him get approved.
absolutely.
I want to see progress. We haven't seen any progress in the last 2 years.
Well, like you said, we want it done.
We're gonna commence cleaning activity next week.
Okay, so I believe, Mr. Chairman, we have a motion which has been modified to.
So we need a second.
We do.
So we have a motion and a second, which includes 90 days. Thank you, gentlemen. Do we have any more discussion from the board? Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Have a good evening.
Motion to adjourn, please. Motion and second, all those in favor? Aye.